When Lewis and Clark first encountered grizzly bears, there may have been 100,000 of them in the American West, from what is now Canada all the way down to Mexico. Grizzlies are among the most fearsome predators on the planet, so for the next 150 years, they were systematically exterminated by settlers, ranchers, and farmers who saw them as a threat to their lives and livelihoods. By the 1960s, there were just a few hundred left in the lower 48 states. In 1975, grizzly bears were among the first animals to be protected under the Endangered Species Act. And what's happened since, especially in the state of Montana, is a story both of conservation and conflict. Ever been face to face with a grizzly? Neither had we.
Ready?
Yeah. In the Swan Mountains of northwestern Montana, we are carrying bear spray and following state bear specialist Eric Wenham and his colleague Milan Vinks deep into the woods.
Hey!
Wenham is checking one of several traps called snares.
Oh, there's a bear.
That he has baited with beaver meat.
Grizzly bear.
You hear that?
The closer we get, the more agitated she's going to become, so we'll kind of be quiet, get a good weight assessment on her, and then we'll just drift right back out. Okay?
I'm with you.
All right. You're okay. You're all right. You're okay. You're okay. You're all right. You're all right.
After the wire snare around its wrist stops the first charge at Wenham, the grizzly makes another effort to get at our cameraman, Don Lee.
You're all right. All right, we'll drift out.
Do you have an estimate of how big that bear is? How much do you think she weighs?
I think it's right around 300 pounds.
That's mid-size for a grizzly. They can weigh as much as 1,000 pounds and stand 9 feet tall on their hind legs.
We're going to mix a little bit of metatomidine in there.
Wenham and Vinks mix a cocktail of veterinary sedatives and load them into a dart gun.
You have the dart, I have the bear spray.
There
We're ready.
you go, we are set.
Vinks carries a shotgun loaded with lethal ammunition just in case. Wenham insists that neither the tranquilizer nor the snare do any lasting harm, and that he needs both as part of a project to attach radio collars to grizzlies and track their population's recovery.
To me, having a grizzly bear population means that the ecosystem is intact.
Hillary Cooley is the wildlife biologist in charge of grizzly bear recovery for the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service.
Grizzly bears were listed in 1975 as a threatened species in the lower 48 states.
I thought their survival was in jeopardy.
Yeah, their range had been reduced by about 98%.
Two places grizzlies hadn't been wiped out were Glacier and Yellowstone National Parks, where a few hundred were protected from eradication. So starting 45 years ago, the recovery effort focused on millions of acres around those two parks.
They've probably more than tripled their numbers, and their range now is more than double what it was at the time of listing.
Since listed as an endangered species back in 1975, the grizzly bear population in this region has made a remarkable comeback, a true success story. But at the same time, another population has also been growing around here, the human population, with houses and subdivisions built right next to the wilderness. And that's often where the trouble starts. Montana's human population has grown by 250,000 since grizzlies were protected in 1975. Most of those people live on valley floors or in foothills not far from bear country.
When you can look at the telemetry from their collars, you realize that at night, this valley belongs to bears. A bear has walked, I've seen the telemetry, through the spot where you and I are sitting right now, and we are within 100 feet of my house.
Bryce Andrews is a rancher, author, and field director for a nonprofit called People and Carnivores, which tries to minimize human-bear conflict. He's seen all the videos of grizzlies going through trash cans, raiding chicken coops and backyard bird feeders, even the fridge. They are true omnivores and really hungry from the moment they emerge from hibernation each spring.
Anything with caloric value, a bear will turn it into what they need to survive.
So they will eat any and everything.
Any and everything. They'll come for bird seed. They'll come for the residue on a barbecue.
It's their appetites that get them into trouble with humans.
Absolutely.
The greatest trouble comes when grizzlies go after livestock or crops that ranchers and farmers count on for their livelihoods.
Bears can be really hard to live with. They kill livestock. There are producers who have 20, 30 cows a year killed by grizzly bears. And so for
Sounds like a
those
lot.
folks, it's a lot. It's a big impact.
The bears probably knocked down between 20 and 25% of my corn that I couldn't harvest every year.
Greg Schock farms in Montana's Mission Valley. He says grizzlies live in the woods about a mile from his home.
We had 18 several years in a row in our cornfield, and nobody believed that I had that many until they put cameras up and actually had footage of them.
18 in your cornfield.
In a 100-acre cornfield, yeah.
With so many grizzlies around, now nearly 2,000, the federal government would like to remove some populations from the endangered species list. So far, court challenges from environmental groups and Native Americans have prevented that. You think it is possible to coexist?
I think we have to. If we don't coexist, who's leaving? The bears aren't leaving and we aren't leaving, so.
So Bryce Andrews' organization does things like install high-voltage electric fences around fields like this 30-acre melon farm. Grizzlies are smart enough to test the fences and sometimes even get around them.
We've got an electrified gate here, which is off right now.
Andrews has an electric fence around his backyard chicken coop, but not all of his neighbors do.
Generally, when there are unprotected chickens in grizzly habitat, it's only a matter of time before something goes wrong.
The grizzly bear will win.
They'll win, and see, they have these phenomenal noses. They smell everything.
Including neighborhood trash cans. If a grizzly develops a taste for garbage, gets accustomed to being near people, and then teaches those bad habits to her cubs, it can prove fatal. Bears that get into such trouble are often trapped by state bear managers. At first, they're relocated to remote regions and released. But if they keep coming back, federal official Hillary Cooley may need to authorize killing them.
Ultimately, that's my decision.
What's that like?
It's the worst part of the job. But it's necessary.
Why necessary?
If we think it's a threat to human safety, for example, a food-conditioned bear, bears can kill people, and it's something we don't mess with. If there's a threat to human safety, we remove it right off the bat.
And remove, you
Euthanize.
euthanize.
Just last year, she had to authorize the killing of nearly 50 grizzlies.
Hey.
The grizzly bear we saw Eric Wenham tranquilize in the Swan Mountains may never have seen a human being before, let alone gotten into trouble. Do you know, is it a male or a female?
I don't yet.
How long will this grizzly be out?
About an hour.
About an hour?
And 20 minutes.
It's male.
Oh, it's a male. Why were you hoping for a female?
We want a radio collar females. Females drive the system. They really do. One, two, three.
Will you collar him?
We collar some males. We're not going to collar this guy, though.
Boy, look at those claws. The forest becomes a field hospital as they attach monitors and even an oxygen bottle to the grizzly.
So he's at 88% oxygen. I like it when it's 90, 95, so I want to get him up.
We measured every part of the bear.
5 1/4, okay.
Blood is drawn, tufts of hair pulled for DNA analysis.
I'm going to call him a 5-year-old bear, okay? So you can see these are his incisors, and if you run your fingernail over the top, You can still feel some cusping, so go ahead.
Tell me I can do this.
You
Stick
can-
my hand in a grizzly bear's mouth.
I'm telling you, you can do that.
Oh, yeah. How about that?
Less than an hour after being darted, a bit ahead of schedule,
He's moving a little bit here.
the grizzly starts to stir.
So he's starting to wake
Okay.
up.
Everybody, we're ready to go. Why don't you guys head on out? Everybody go.
We didn't need to be told again. As we hustled out, Wenham removed the hood from the bear's head and hurried out himself.
Your first question will be, does that happen often?
When he was sniffing up, that
When
was
he's
time
lifting
to
his
go.
head, it's time to go.
It's time to go.
We had about as safe an encounter with a grizzly bear as is possible to have. But with more people going deep into bear country to hike or bike or camp or hunt, there are several decidedly unsafe encounters every year.
I didn't really get a warning, and all of a sudden there's a grizzly bear running at me. And in about probably less than a second, it was on me.
Anders Brosty was hunting for deer and elk with a friend in the wilderness north of his Montana home on November 11th, 2018, when he stumbled upon a grizzly who'd been dozing in the snow.
It bit my arm here, kind of thrashed it around, and then bit my leg here, started pulling on me and kind of tossing me around. And then it just dropped my foot and ran off.
Do you have any idea why he didn't just finish you off or drag you off?
Nope.
Brosty's hunting partner, Dan, reached him within a minute or two. Luckily, they had a cell phone signal to call 911. State bear specialist Eric Wenham was one of the first responders on the scene, and he snapped a photo of a very large paw print in the snow.
They had to chopper you out.
2 choppers.
How long were you in the hospital?
I was in the hospital for 6 days. In that 6 days, I had 3 different surgeries. My arm was broken, my thumb was broken, and my hand was dislocated. My foot was basically held to my ankle with soft tissue.
This is the grizzly that attacked Anders Brosty in a photo taken 4 years earlier when state bear managers trapped and released him. DNA samples proved the match.
So the bear that attacked you is still out there.
Yep,
Does that bother you? You okay with that?
I'm okay with it. I was intruding. So to me, the bear's response was not any more inappropriate than what somebody else's response would be if I trespassed into their home.
Brosty, who is the co-founder of a company that makes mountain bikes, is back on his after many months of tough rehab. And he says he and his friend Dan plan to go hunting again this November 11th, the anniversary of the attack.
I think it's part of what makes Montana wild. If we didn't have grizzly bears, it'd be a little less wild. They're a part of our ecosystem. They play a role in everything that's going on around here. I think that's kind of cool. I'd prefer not to see one that close again, though.
The book and movie Jaws introduced us to the great white shark more than 40 years ago and scared us out of our wits. Much of the film was shot in the waters off Cape Cod, Massachusetts. The irony is that when it came out in the mid-1970s, there were very few white sharks around Cape Cod. The species was in the midst of a serious decline, and the movie made it worse, with fishermen hunting the few great whites that there were. White sharks were granted federal protection in 1997, and in the years since have made a comeback that has delighted conservationists and frightened swimmers and surfers. On Cape Cod this summer, shark sightings and beach closings were about as common as lobster rolls. As we saw for ourselves, the Atlantic great white shark is back.
Look at this fish.
Look at this fish.
Yeah, look at this fish.
On a Tuesday in mid-September, we are with Dr. Greg Scomal, chief shark scientist for the Massachusetts Department of Marine Fisheries, following an 11-foot white shark swimming just feet off the beach near Truro on Cape Cod.
And if you're standing there, you don't know that
have
shark's
no
here.
idea.
You don't know that shark's
No
here.
idea. She's like 10 feet offshore.
Yeah, it's very close now.
White sharks are so close to shore because that's where their favorite food is. Gray seals, thousands of which now call Cape Cod home.
This is the restaurant right here. These sharks have found the restaurant and they're waiting for the doors to open. You know? And when those seals begin to leave the beach, you know,
It's dinner time.
It's dinner time.
Skomel and his team from the Atlantic White Shark Conservancy are trying to attach electronic tracking tags to as many sharks as they can, nearly 200 so far. The way they do it is fascinating. Pilot Wayne Davis locates sharks from his spotter plane, then guides boat captain John King onto them.
Yeah, use a little gas, John. He's right on the shoal. It's about as good as it's going to get.
Standing on a pulpit on the bow of a small boat, Greg Skomel wields a long pole that has a dart and a tag at the end.
Wait. Right there, done.
You got him?
Tagged.
That was it.
There he goes.
Oh my God.
Beautiful, beautiful placement, Greg.
Yeah, thank you, John. Nice
You
work.
can see where it was?
Yeah, you can see it right at the base of the dorsal. See it?
Yeah.
Now we're going to learn about that fish for the next 9-10 years.
They will track the fish because the tag constantly emits a ping that is picked up when the shark swims close to acoustic receivers attached to buoys.
And how many
where
of
they
these do
spend
you
their
have
time.
up and down the coast?
We have over 100 out all over Massachusetts.
And that's just you. Other
That's
people
just
have
us.
others.
Yeah, so we can actually track the movements of our white sharks when they leave here.
The tags also help Skomel and his research colleague Megan Winton figure out just how many sharks there are, and have established that Cape Cod is now one of the world's white shark hotspots. They regularly haul buoys out of the water and download data from them to a tablet that displays each time a tagged shark swims by.
Lots of white shark detections.
This tells them a lot about individuals. They have confirmed that they are loners and that the same one will often come back to precisely the same hunting ground year after year. A white shark seemed to be hunting Greg Skomel last year when it came up jaws open right under the pulpit.
Whoa! Holy crap!
What? Right up!
This-
Open his mouth right at my feet.
That shook him up for a bit, but he insists it shouldn't shake up the public.
You know, all I can tell them is that the probability of them being bitten is incredibly low, but it's not much more I can say.
Because that fear is primal.
I think that fear is primal. I think it's innate. I think it's in them. It's in us. It's in all of us.
5 days after our day on the water off Cape Cod, we needed a bigger boat for a very different shark tagging expedition 600 miles to the northeast, just off Hay Island in Nova Scotia.
Good morning. Good morning. How are you?
We boarded a 125-foot research ship called O-Search, which has been tagging Atlantic white sharks from Florida to Canada since 2012. Founder Chris Fisher invited us to join the first day of his 2019 Nova Scotia expedition.
And we come up here, we've been here 24 hours, we've seen 2 or 3 sharks, and no one ever even knew to come look here before.
O-Search launches a team on a small boat to hook white sharks much as fishermen would, using long lines, bait, and floats to keep them near the surface.
Looked in the corner of the mouth, squared away, everything's green out here.
O-Search is a converted Alaskan crab boat equipped with a platform that's lowered into the water off one side. As the small boat tows the shark alongside, O-Search fishing master Brett McBride leaps onto the submerged platform into water that's 49 degrees. With the line in his hand, he guides an 1,100-pound male white shark onto the cradle.
Whoa, look at that.
The platform is raised out of the water, effectively beaching the shark. It offers no resistance, worn out after being hooked and towed for nearly an hour. McBride gets right in its face to insert a hose between its giant jaws.
Keeping the clean seawater flowing over its gills. I'm making sure it's getting good oxygen.
A team member starts a clock. They don't want to keep the shark out of the water for more than 15 minutes. And OCEARCH chief scientist, Dr. Robert Huter, gives me an opportunity I'm not quite sure I want.
So Bill, just go ahead and take your time. Just feel how beautiful that is.
Oh my God.
How smooth. Then go this way. Rub your hand the other way, and you feel it's kind of bumpy.
Yeah. My God.
The OCEARCH team swarms the shark, drawing blood and tissue samples, picking off parasites to be analyzed, and measuring its girth and length.
371 total.
That's 371 centimeters, or 12 feet 2 inches. The biggest Atlantic great white they've caught was a 16-foot female who weighed 3,500 pounds. As Chris Fisher measures this one, Bob Huter inserts an acoustic tag, like the one Greg Skomel attaches with a dart.
That doesn't harm the shark?
No. It's just, it floats in the body cavity.
Okay, let's roll the shark. Everybody step back.
After the shark is rolled onto its belly,
There we are.
We're at 11 minutes.
Chris Fisher drills through the dorsal fin. He insists it's no more painful than piercing an ear. He's attaching the tag that really sets OCEARCH apart in the world of white shark tracking.
This spot tag allows us to track this animal in real time for up to 5 years.
The spot tag will send a signal to a satellite each time this shark's dorsal fin comes above the surface of the water. OCEARCH has put nearly 50 of them on Atlantic white sharks and displays their tracks on its website.
And that's how you learn not only where they are, but what they're doing where they are, which is what you need to know to manage, right? Where's the mating? Where's the birthing? Where's the foraging? Where's the gestating?
While some scientists criticize the OCEARCH techniques as too invasive, they are gathering a lot of data. 17 different research projects will get samples and information from a single shark.
Doesn't take much to make everybody happy.
Still, there are a lot of unknowns. No white shark has ever been kept in captivity, and no one has ever seen them mate or give birth anywhere. But there are also discoveries. The OCEARCH team has confirmed that the waters off Long Island are an important nursery for baby whites like these called pups.
Did you get him?
Yeah, got him.
And back on Cape Cod, acoustic tags are teaching Greg Skomel about just how far adult sharks travel.
So what's the most interesting thing you have learned about them?
We now know, based on the tagging work we've done the last 10 years, is that when they leave Cape Cod, they go down to Florida and they spend the time in the Gulf of Mexico and they overwinter in these southern climates. But then some of these sharks move out into the open Atlantic Ocean. And when they're out in the middle of the Atlantic, they dive down to depths as great as 3,000 feet every day. And there's not a scientist on Earth that can tell you why they do that.
Scientists have learned how long-lived they are.
White sharks, we now know, live over 70 years.
70 years.
70 years.
They don't start hunting seals until their late teens, but when they do, watch out. In this footage Greg Skomel shot, you see a seal leap out of the water with a shark right on its tail.
Have you ever seen that before?
Here, the shark catches a seal, and the ocean water explodes in blood red in an instant. The shark then swims away with half a seal in its jaws. Seals have been protected by federal law since 1972, and some 25,000 now live near Cape Cod. More seals means more sharks, and that's what worries the swimmers and surfers sharing the water with them. This photo was taken at the Cape barely a week ago.
Great white sharks very rarely attack people. The one that killed a swimmer named Arthur Medici just off this beach last September was the first fatal attack on Cape Cod since 1936. But it triggered a fear of attacks that can hardly be measured.
Scary warning signs on every beach, stop bleed kits at lifeguard stands, a phone app called Sharktivity that reports sightings in real time, with local news doing much the same, and community meetings packed with frightened citizens.
And no sharks or seals are worth a young man's life. They're just not.
You're the scientist, but you also live here, and you know people are afraid.
We can't bury our heads in the sand when it comes to shark attacks. And so that's in my face every day now. And then it always falls back on the question of, well, what do you tell your kids to do? You know?
What do you tell your kids to do?
You know, I tell my kids, don't go out past waist deep.
That's chilling advice for swimmers, for surfers, and for the Cape Cod Chamber of Commerce.
I mean, we basically got to undo everything Jaws did. I mean, we got half the people on the eastern seaboard terrified about something that almost never happens.
I saw the teeth on this character here. People who are swimming nearby should not be afraid of that?
No, they're clever. Like, even though we dress up like their food and try to fool them, they very rarely get fooled.
What do you mean dress up like their food?
You ever seen what someone in a wetsuit looks like compared to a seal?
He's got a point. When this white shark's 15 minutes on the O-Search platform ran out, we were ordered off.
That was amazing.
They gave him a name,
Sydney,
for the nearest Nova Scotia town, and began lowering him back into the water.
And what you guys have done to this does not harm or hurt the shark at all?
No, because we're monitoring the stress of the animal throughout.
After a couple of minutes, he perked up, especially when he noticed the O-Search photographer in the water around the corner. Finally, with fish master Brett McBride helping steer him by the tail, off went Sydney.
There he goes. Do your thing. Good luck, old boy. Sydney. Sydney. Yeah.
We name fancy cars and sports teams after them, but precious few people have ever seen a Jaguar in the wild. They don't live in the United States anymore and can only be found in the sweltering jungles of Central and South America. But just try to find one. They hunt by night and sleep by day, comfortably concealed in thick, dark brush. It's because of their elusive nature, their power, and their beauty that jaguars have long been worshipped by tribes as demigods, whose real home is a spiritual world which man cannot even fathom. But whichever world they frequent, they only emerge briefly during the dry season when they go down to rivers to drink. So when it got dry in September, and Alan Rabinowitz, the world's foremost authority on jaguars, invited us to go with him to some far-flung wetlands in Brazil, near the Bolivian border, we picked up the phone and booked our flights. We headed towards an unspoiled, remote area called the Pantanal, where the temperature rarely dipped below 115 degrees. We had to cross more than 125 rustic wooden bridges over dried-up ponds and lakes, home to piranhas and caimans, cousins to the crocodile. It was good to be in a car. We started our search for jaguars on the Cuyaba River with Alan Rabinowitz, the CEO of Panthera, a new conservation group. He told us the jaguars are very fast and have been known to kill people. It was good to be in a boat. Rabinowitz has been studying the cat's migration routes and habitats in the jungle for 30 years, but he has gone months without seeing a single one. His advice to us? Get lucky.
It takes hours and hours of doing this because even when they're out there, it's almost needle in a haystack. Even though this is the densest, highest concentration of jaguars matching any place on Earth, there's still a limited number of jaguars here.
But luck was a lady that day. It wasn't long before we caught our first glimpse, and it was just a glimpse, of a young jaguar sitting on the riverbank behind that fallen tree. If you can't see him clearly, well, neither could we. But Rabinowitz?
Its head is right there. Amazing. See it? You got it. It's beautiful. See it? Isn't that something? This gives you the real gut feel of the secretive nature of this animal. There's no sign of defeat in its face. Wow.
At dawn the next day, we went looking for jaguars again. One of our spotters tried to tempt the cats out of the jungle, but his simulated mating call just didn't do it. But it might have appealed to anacondas. This fellow was medium-sized, according to the spotters, 9 feet long. Then we went up a small river that looked like an aquatic Garden of Eden. No jaguars here either, but an extraordinary assembly of birds and others. We saw a family of very rare giant river otters basking in the sun after a morning of fishing and swimming. We saw the world's largest rodents, unflappable 100-pound capybaras, a favorite dish of jaguars. Jaguars like caiman as well. This caiman was having lunch. This one had been somebody else's lunch, probably a jaguar's.
Small, a young jaguar.
Photographer Steve Winter has been a jaguar groupie for years and was helping us look for the cats. He has shot what could be the finest jaguar portraits ever taken. They weren't easy to come by.
I spent the first 3 months in the jungle and got a big fat 0.
Really?
No cats.
3 months.
Right.
How'd you feel about that?
I felt like my career was over.
We were beginning to feel the same way. So we headed out again at night. Our spotters told us that they could see the reflection of their lights in the eyes of a jaguar 100 yards away. We were skeptical. We were wrong.
That's like 80 to 85 kilos. And that's a relatively small jaguar in this area. Look at her. God, she's beautiful. Oh, man, and when she looks right at you.
It's one of the most beautiful things I've ever seen.
Yeah. This was a great sighting.
But the best was yet to come. A few minutes later, we happened to be there as a jaguar swam from one side of the river to the other. It was a once-in-a-lifetime shot in the dark.
This is a rare sight. I've never caught them in the water. I've never gotten it in the water before. That was a young one.
Dr. Alan Rabinowitz, zoologist, scholar, scientist, was as excited as a kid at the zoo. Perhaps more excited.
That was spectacular. I've never seen that before. What luck, what unbelievable luck, just as it's swimming across. There was no fear there. There was just pure curiosity. Like, what are you guys bothering me about?
Maybe we had bothered her because she disappeared. But then it seems she got curious again.
Look at that. It's just sitting up there on the mountain. That's phenomenal.
She looked a little sleepy or confused, but there she was, the diva, perfectly lit, taking her curtain call. It was hard to imagine that this lovely starlet was really a ferocious predator who sinks her fangs into the skull of her prey, killing it instantly. We were beginning to understand why jaguars were viewed as otherworldly beings by the tribes that used to live here. Because he's a creature of the night, his real home is said to be the underworld, which he dominates just as he dominates the jungle. Killing a jaguar is believed by some tribes as being equivalent to killing an ancestor, and is said to condemn the killer to eternal damnation. That myth has helped the jaguar survive. And in the strangest way, jaguars helped Alan Rabinowitz survive. It all began with a debilitating condition he suffered through, even before he knew what a jaguar was.
When I was a young child, I couldn't speak. I had a severe stutter.
You literally couldn't talk?
I could talk, but I had severe blocks. My whole body would spasm. My mouth would close shut. And back then, unlike now, they thought it was completely psychological. Now we know it's more genetic. So they would put me in special classes. They would put me in what all the kids called the retarded classes. And I just stopped trying. I stopped even trying to speak to the human world. What I could do, stutterers can sing without stuttering, and I couldn't sing very well. And stutterers can speak to animals. And every day I'd come home from school and I'd go into my closet because I love being in the dark, and I'd speak to my green turtles or chameleons or lizards or garter snakes. If I was having a particularly bad week at school, which often happened, my father would take me to the Bronx Zoo.
And that's where his fascination, his obsession began, in the Bronx Zoo.
One pitiful lone jaguar sat in the great cat house. It was big, it was powerful, and it was all alone. And I was so incredibly attracted to that one lone jaguar. I would make my father stay back, and I would lean over towards the bars, and I would start talking.
You talked to the jaguar?
I did talk to the jaguar.
Do you remember what you said?
I would say how people are stupid, how they don't understand me clearly the same way they don't understand you, how they're locking you up in this cage the way I'm locked up in my own head. Those are the things I would talk about to the jaguar. I made a promise over and over again that if I ever got my voice back, that somehow I would help that animal, help that jaguar, help these animals like him.
Alan Rabinowitz has kept his promise. Devotion to jaguars became his religion. Before he got married, he lived alone in the jungle just to be close to jaguars, doing then what he does now, learning more about them every day, setting up traps like this one, so that he can attach radio collars to their necks. One night, Alan and his team snared this young lady and put her to sleep for a while.
This is the same cat we saw swimming this afternoon, isn't it?
It's likely. It looks as if it probably is.
The team monitored the jaguar's vital signs, took a blood sample, and put a GPS unit around her neck.
It's through the data of a few animals like this that we're able to be saving this whole species.
And here's a jaguar we saw from the sky. The data Rabinowitz has collected showed him that jaguars instinctively travel great distances, sometimes hundreds of miles. Trouble is, they can't anymore. Cattle ranches now interrupt their old roaming routes, and ranchers kill jaguars because jaguars eat their cattle. That's where billionaire Tom Kaplan, the co-founder of Panthera, the outfit trying to save jaguars, comes in. He's buying up ranches and telling the ranchers, his employees now, to lay off the jaguars. To make sure they understand that there's been a change of ownership, he's introduced a new branding iron. The paw print of a jaguar. He's also winning them over the old-fashioned way, improving their lives, building schools and clinics.
There is no better way to stop poaching than to make the local community say, hey, wait a minute, our children have medicine and education because of the jaguar. When you show that, you've won their hearts and you've won their minds, and then you've won the war.
Alan Rabinowitz wants the jaguars to be able to roam freely again, so he's working with governments as well as ranchers to protect what he calls jaguar corridors. They connect the different isolated areas where the cats are still thriving. He gets to these areas sometimes, and sometimes he gets too close.
Now, how far away are you from him?
I would say about 20 feet.
20 feet?
Yeah.
And he is standing, sitting, lying?
He was standing. Then probably within a few seconds, I realized this is dangerous. And I fell. Of course, you know, what more could happen? So I fell backwards, thinking, okay, if you want to kill me, now's the time. I'm on my back. And the jaguar just stood up and started walking off into the jungle, not very far away. But this is what I'll never forget. It turned back to me. It gave a low growl. It wasn't an aggressive growl. It just gave kind of a low growling sound, and it looked at me. And I looked at it, and I could look at its eyes now with no fear. And I said to it, I said out loud, we're okay now. We're gonna be okay.
Alan Rabinowitz can only hope he'll be okay. He conquered his stutter, but now he's fighting leukemia and doesn't know how much longer he'll be able to stay in the jungle. But before we left, he told us he was happy that after his 30 years of devotion, we'd be introducing so many of his friends on 60 Minutes.
Mozambique's Gorongosa National Park was the envy of Africa. Wildlife drew tourists from around the world. But beginning in the 1960s, a man-made catastrophe slaughtered the animals until it was said there was nothing left but mosquitoes and landmines. In 2008, we followed an American entrepreneur who dreamed of returning a wasteland to greatness. Now, 14 years later, Greg Carr has something to show the world, and we couldn't resist a return to Gorongosa when Carr sends invitations like this.
Just come and sit at a sunset by the lake in the center of this national park. I mean, time stops. And you get 100 colors of yellow and 100 colors of orange, and then the dusk sets in. And then a flock of birds go over the water, and there's a hippo over there making a noise. And there's an impala over there. And, you know, it's like, well, I could have been here 100,000 years ago, and it might have been the same.
Greg Carr's wonder is almost like disbelief. 1 million acres of Africa reborn.
When I first came here in 2004, I could drive around with my Mozambican friends all day long. And if we were lucky, maybe we'd see one baboon or one warthog or something. Now, we drive around, and it's an ocean of wildlife. You know, come around the corner, there's a herd of elephants. You know, go the other direction, there's some lion cubs. 10,000 water buck, and I say to myself, you know what, nature can rebound.
The rebound is in Southeast Africa, near the center of Mozambique. Here, 28 years of war from the 60s to the 90s killed an estimated 1 million people and wiped out 95% of the wildlife in Gorongosa for food and profit. As the war raged in the 1980s, Greg Carr was a tech entrepreneur who'd made a fortune perfecting voicemail. He quit business to devote himself to human rights, and in 2004 he met Mozambique's president, Joaquim Chissano, who made a wild pitch.
And he said, look, please come to Mozambique and help us, and we want to restore our national park.
When we flew over this, I said, this is it.
When we met Carr in 2008, his nonprofit foundation had signed a 20-year contract with Mozambique. His plan was to import animals from all over Africa.
Well, step one, we had to remove 20,000 traps and wire snares that were left in this park, left over from the war. Get rid of all those, because when I first came here, I mean, we think we had 5 or 6 lions, maybe.
In 1 million acres.
In 1 million acres. And the lions that we did have, most of them had 3 legs because they'd stepped in a trap or something. And then second, some of the species were just gone completely. So we went on a process. First, bring in the herbivores. So we bring in 200 buffalo. We bring in 200 wildebeest. We bring in some zebra. And then when you got enough herbivores, then you're going to want the carnivores back. So we reintroduced leopards. We reintroduced hyenas. The lions, all by themselves, their numbers just took off. So from 5 or 6 lions when we started, we now have probably 200.
Gorongosa's lion conservation is urgent because since 1950, Africa's lion population has fallen from 500,000 to 20,000 due to habitat loss and hunting. We saw how Gorongosa is protecting its lions on a mission with park veterinarian Antonio Paulo.
Okay, I'll shoot now.
Paulo fired a tranquilizer dart
right on target.
And a 300-pound lioness led us on a chase.
Reverse, give space, turn on.
She left us behind but she couldn't outrun the sedative.
There she is.
Yeah, she's there. She's sleeping.
She'd be out about an hour as Dr. Paulo changed her failing GPS collar. The signal goes to headquarters, where they track the prides and herds. A bit of ear was nicked for genetic tests, and then there was a surprise.
You think she's pregnant?
Yeah, she's look like pregnant.
And there is the future of the park.
Yes, the future cubs of the park. Yeah.
Later, she awoke and headed out with her future cub.
I never imagined it would go so well or so fast. In 2018, we did an aerial survey, so counting only the big animals. We counted 100,000 large animals from the air.
Thrilled as he is, it wasn't wildlife that drew this 63-year-old Idaho native to Africa. In 2008, he introduced us to the 200,000 people living around the park, survivors of the wars, living on $1 a day.
People had nothing. I mean, they didn't have clothes. They were wearing rags, or they had made clothes out of tree bark. They were eating insects and trying to catch mice. And, that's when it struck me. Well, this national park's going to have to help the people.
Today, Gorongosa National Park employs 1,600 workers. Tourism brings in cash, which goes to the people and to the park. And Greg Carr has partnered with the government on health care and education. Carr is the biggest donor, but U.S. foreign aid kicks in about $6 million a year.
We now work in 89 primary schools, which is every single school that surrounds this national park. We are training 600 school teachers right now. Now think about how difficult it is to create a school system when you don't have school teachers that know how to read and write because of generations of war. Now something we really focused on as step one was really vulnerable girls. Now, a lot of times what happens in the poor families around here, a girl turns 13 or 14 and the family says, well, it's time for her to get married. Now, it may not be what they actually want, but they don't think there's another choice. And this is what happens, and she marries a farmer and that's it. So we started something called the Girls Club.
There are 3,000 girls in 92 after-school clubs. The program is led by Larissa Souza.
Why is this the job of a conservation park?
Why not? It should be the job for everyone. For everyone. Education is for everyone.
What's it?
The clubs provide the resources to get the girls into high school. And it gives students an answer to our question, which 5 years ago wouldn't have made sense. What do you want to be?
Professora.
We have a teacher, a nurse, a conservation park ranger, and another nurse.
Another nurse, yes. When we started the program, they didn't know that they had this choice.
And now they do.
Now they do.
This land belongs to these people. They've been here forever. It's their animals, it's their land, it's their trees, it's their cultural and spiritual heritage, right? It's an idea that came from my hero, Nelson Mandela. And the idea was to create a human rights park. What does that mean, right? A park that cares about the people, a park that belongs to the people. So instead of a park turning its back on the people, a park opening itself to the people and say, this is your park, these are your animals, these are your opportunities.
We saw those opportunities on Mount Gorongosa, which was stripped of trees during the wars. Here, Carr's nonprofit foundation is giving away coffee trees. 868 family farmers working for themselves are earning far more than ever, so they can't plant trees fast enough, which reforests the mountain. Carr's foundation buys the beans at above the market rate and built the farmers a roasting plant. There's no better example of Carr's model for lifting people and healing the wild. It's working, but the last 14 years haven't been sweet music alone.
Since we were here in 2008,
yes,
there have been enormous roadblocks
to this project.
That's right. If I had known then what was going to come.
What came was another civil war in 2013, and then in 2019, a cyclone leveled 100,000 homes.
Okay, there was the 6 years of war, and then the cyclone. When Cyclone Idai hit, basically every one of our employees became a first responder. So, in other words, oh, there's an elephant right there.
Well, there certainly
I
is.
just have to stop and say hello to the elephant.
We couldn't find the wildlife in 2008.
And now they're interrupting our interview.
And now they're walking in on the interview.
Well.
Was there ever a time that you thought to yourself, I did my best, but this just isn't going to be humanly possible?
Not for a second. Not for 1 second.
With the cyclones, with the return of the Civil War.
I just think every time something like that happens, it just makes you more determined, not less determined. And when you've got people suffering in a war that need help, or people suffering in a cyclone that need help, you know, you're more committed. You don't lose commitment at a time like that.
We saw commitment in the rangers who protect the park. For the flora and the fauna, they sing, we will die for our park. Part of what they protect are endangered species, including this mammal with a bottomless taste for termites. Pangolins are hunted for their scales, which are prized in folk medicine. Veterinarian Mercia Angela told us that pangolins ride on their mothers' backs.
Oh, hello there.
But we found any back will do.
That's funny. He just naturally goes right up to the shoulder and hangs on your back.
Yeah.
Powerful tail.
Tail, yeah, the tail is very powerful. They also use for protection.
I'm surprised they're so docile. I mean, this is a wild animal.
Yes, it's a wild animal.
Success, eh?
But for us, the most interesting animal in the park
Gorongosa, oye!
is Greg Carr, an entrepreneur with the empathy to see, the humility to listen, and the optimism to act. His business model is creating a new ecosystem where animals that were hunted are suddenly worth much more alive. How much of your personal fortune have you put into this?
Well, I'd like to keep that a secret, but unfortunately, I think, you know, you could probably do the math and figure it out. It's more than $100 million. My message to anybody with money is, I mean, what are you going to do? Stick it all in your casket? I mean, why not, you know, why not enjoy the joy of philanthropy? I would say to the billionaire next door, go out and enjoy spending your money to help some people.
Find your Gorongosa.
Go find your Gorongosa, and it will bless you more than you can possibly ever bless it.
Zoos have always been places where people come to marvel at and connect with the wonders of the animal world. But with more and more species endangered in their natural habitats, zoos have had to change their stripes. They have shifted their focus to conservation, and gone is the old practice of bringing in exotic animals from the wild. But without them, zoos today have to repopulate from within, and it's complicated. It turns out that behind every baby animal crowds flock to see, and biologists want to protect, there's an elaborate mix of science, software, genetics, and moving vans. It's no longer the old-fashioned birds and bees at the modern zoo. It's more like Match.com.
Hey, look at the baby!
Animals with babies.
Hi, baby.
Always a surefire hit at the zoo.
Oh, look!
It's what all living creatures are biologically programmed to do. Mate, rear young, and pass their genes on to the next generation.
Yeah, boy.
But you might be surprised to learn that long before the babies, And even long before the making of the babies, there is this.
We have 3 potential females that can move.
A decidedly unromantic meeting in an unromantic sounding place called the Population Management Center.
And that's a good pairing.
In this conference room at Lincoln Park Zoo in Chicago, population biologists like Amanda Lawless use computers to search out the best genetic matches for just about every zoo animal in North America.
Things like flamingos can have hundreds of animals, and in a planning meeting, we are going to talk about every single animal in that population.
Come on, if you have a meeting on flamingos,
yes,
you're going to talk about every single individual flamingo in every zoo in the United States.
Yes.
Wow.
So some of these can take quite a long time.
What this leads to is zoo animals traveling the country in search of love, or at least a good genetic match.
That's our new breeding pair. We just put
Layla, the rhino in front, moved from Kansas to Chicago to mate with Nakili, who seemed interested.
Hello.
This marmoset monkey just flew in from Omaha to meet her mate. And on the morning we visited, one of these warthogs was loaded into this crate for the 9-hour drive to his new home and prospective love interest waiting in Maryland.
Oh, they're eating.
Awesome. Imagine transporting a polar bear.
That's Nuka.
Detroit Zoo Executive Director and CEO Ron Kagan can.
So where did the male come from?
He was born in Denver, then went to Pittsburgh, and then came here.
Did he go to Pittsburgh to mate as well?
Yes.
Oh my goodness, he's a traveling
well,
swordsman.
That's what we do.
It began back in the 1970s when zoos largely stopped getting animals from the wild and had to learn to manage their populations themselves. They came to realize that one major risk in a closed system, says geneticist Bob Lacey at the Chicago Zoological Society, is inbreeding.
The simple thing to do if we were breeding animals would be, for example, to have 100 giraffes in zoos and just let them breed on their own. The problem with that is if we did that, probably 5 or 10 of the males would be good breeders, and they would exclude the other males from breeding. And we would very rapidly have a population where everyone is closely related to everybody else. And therefore, we would lose diversity.
Lose diversity, meaning genetic diversity, since all the other giraffes' genes would be lost.
Click on one of those animals.
So Lacey and a few colleagues developed software, now used worldwide, to assess animals' lineages and calculate ideal couplings to make sure all genetic lines remain in the mix.
Can I call you the father of computerized animal dating? But it is computerized dating.
It is,
I
yes.
mean, we smile about
Yes,
it, but
is.
it really is, that's what you're involved
And in ways, well, I don't know much about human computerized dating, but in ways that are probably comparable, that we have to look at a lot of different factors, not only inbreeding, but social compatibility, age differences, how far away they would have to move.
So we'll have those 3 transfers.
Lawless and her team use Lacey's software every day. She gave us a mini tutorial.
Can we look at gorillas?
Yes.
Starting with a list of every gorilla in an accredited zoo in North America.
Louisville, Atlanta, Milwaukee, Cincinnati.
For each gorilla, there is basic information.
So that's its
Father,
parents. Yeah.
mother, birthday.
A complete family tree tracing its ancestry all the way back to the wild.
Oh, that's so interesting.
And most importantly, this genetic ranking done by an algorithm with males on the left, females on the right, that rates each animal by how rare its genes are and therefore how desirable.
So you can see Little Rock has the 4th most valuable female.
It then tells you the genetic value of any pair of animals you choose on a scale of 1 to 6.
So you can see when we pair these 2 animals that they're getting a 1. So number 1 is the most valuable, 2 is still valuable. And
all the way down to 6s, which she says should never breed.
Can I try?
Yes. So all you have to do is click anywhere.
I have to say, it was oddly thrilling to be a gorilla matchmaker.
Look what I just did. I found you a 1.
My pair was a male from Dallas and a female from Columbus. It seemed to be very promising.
I'm feeling so good about this.
But she said we still had to check a few details.
Okay, the age. We didn't just pair up a 2-year-old with a 20-year-old, did we? And we didn't. So she's 17, he's 21. And so
next, we'd have to check on their temperaments and compatibility.
Will they get along?
Will they get along?
If so, they could end up here in what are called breeding and transfer plans, species by species reports the Population Management Center sends to every zoo.
Oh, and here are the rhinos. Oh, what are these? Beetles.
Yeah, so that's
a whole book for beetles.
Yes.
Telling them literally what every single one of their animals should do with whom.
So we want 2735 to breed with 2764 because that's a genetically valuable pair.
Valuable not because their genes are special somehow, but because they're less common.
Oh, here comes another one.
But what about species that live all together in big groups, like penguins or flamingos, so zoo managers can't control who pairs up with whom? Well, there's a system for that, too, says Lincoln Park Zoo's Executive Vice President Megan Ross.
What we do is we put together a grid where the females are on one side and the males are on the other. And then for each pair that could possibly happen in that flock, we have a recommendation.
Again, 1 for the best genetic matches, down to 6 for the worst.
So what happens if the pair that's 6 wants to breed or tries to breed?
So we might do egg management, where we might take the egg and replace it with a dummy egg so that their eggs would not hatch.
You actually go in and take their egg and replace it with a fake egg.
We do.
We witnessed egg management in action. The keeper creeping in with a basket of dummy eggs and notes on which birds have partnered up. She checks to see which pairs laid eggs overnight, then makes a switch. When you take an egg away and put in that dummy egg, are they not aware that the dummy egg is not their egg?
As far as I know, they do not realize that we have swapped their eggs out.
They sure didn't seem to notice. And how's this for egg management? This pair of European white storks used to get high genetic ratings, but they have had so many babies, their genes are now too common. So when they laid another egg last year, the zoo took it and gave them someone else's, the egg of a genetically valuable but inexperienced pair of storks from Cleveland.
The stork parents at Cleveland Metro Park Zoo were not really attending to the nest in a way that we thought they were going to be good parents. So they sent their egg to us, and we swapped out the eggs.
You brought a fertilized egg here to Chicago from Cleveland.
We did.
It hatched last May.
And now this pair is actually rearing another pair's chick.
Did they know it's not theirs?
I don't think so.
So stork foster parents.
You probably thought they just delivered the babies.
Your program to create this genetic diversity requires an enormous amount of cooperation, and I was under the impression that zoos compete. They compete for the panda, they compete for exotic animals. Are zoos not competing anymore?
Zoos are still competing. Zoos compete for audience, for publicity, for all kinds of things. But someone gave me a good example the other day of baseball teams. Obviously, baseball teams compete, but a single baseball team on its own is pointless. It can't do anything.
Yeah, you need a league.
The same thing's true of zoos. If zoos were all independently operating and not willing to work together, we would all sink. Our populations would die out on us. They would become highly inbred. So we do compete in a sense, but we recognize that we will all succeed in conservation together or not.
And zoos are now working on conservation with wildlife agencies as well to rescue wild species in distress, like the Mexican gray wolf. These wolves once lived across the Southwest, but were viewed as predators and killed off.
So by 1980, they were gone from the wild.
I mean, seriously gone?
They were gone.
The U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service brought the last remaining wolves to zoos to see if they could pull off a miracle and bring the species back from just 7, what biologists call founding animals.
So we used the computer analyses to decide exactly which animals should be bred each year, how many to breed, so we didn't lose any of those 7 lineages.
And it worked.
Is that a pup? Oh, yeah, okay, I see it.
And from those 7, they've increased numbers up to now about 250, and they've been releasing them in the wild for about the last 20 years.
But zoo geneticists are still at it,
Last spring, when litters of puppies were born here at Chicago's Brookfield Zoo and in the wild, zoo staff took 2 of the newborns from here and switched them with 2 from the wild pack. To make sure the mothers wouldn't reject them, the staff coated the pups with dirt and urine from the dens they were going to. The mothers in both packs are now raising the exchanged pups as their own. We saw with storks that they swap the eggs.
Right.
But you're actually swapping the actual
pups. Because the wild has so few animals that if we didn't do some swapping, they wouldn't have any appropriate mates. So we swap between zoos and the wild just the way we swap between zoos.
But zoo genetic matchmaking isn't just success stories. There are dilemmas and moral quandaries. How do you stop animals with do not breed recommendations from mating? And what happens when animals breed too well and zoos don't have enough space? They can't just make them disappear, or can they? That's where our story takes a surprising, some would say darker turn, when we come back. Zoos around the world have adopted genetic breeding programs similar to the one in the U.S. As a result, many species are breeding better in captivity than ever before. But that success has brought challenges and differences of opinion. Case in point, how to manage animals that don't get a breeding recommendation, animals whose genes are already well represented in zoos. One radical solution, culling them. Killing them. That's what the Copenhagen Zoo in Denmark did a few years ago with a healthy 2-year-old giraffe named Marius, and it caused an international uproar. A warning, this part of our story contains some difficult images that young children may not want to see. But first, the preferred American solution for zoo animals who aren't supposed to breed.
See one? See him right there? Oh, he's doing.
Bahati is a 27-year-old gorilla at the Lincoln Park Zoo in Chicago. Every afternoon, she and the other gorillas here get a snack.
They're eating it.
Being gorillas, they don't bother to unwrap it.
See it?
But unbeknownst to Bahati, hers has something special mixed in. Bahati is on the pill.
Our gorillas take the birth control pills every single day.
The same stuff we take?
The exact same stuff that we do. They all have their packets.
So ours actually come from Walgreens.
No.
Yeah, same 28-day pack.
Mike Atkinson is the chief veterinarian at Chicago's Brookfield Zoo. For all the gorillas, chimps?
Gorillas, chimps, orangutans, our gibbons.
Look, Walgreens. Look at that. Who knew?
Yeah.
Oh, look. And that was just the beginning. Turns out all kinds of zoo animals use all kinds of contraception. So she got a no-breed recommendation?
She got a no-breed recommendation.
This monkey, anesthetized for her annual physical, was getting a birth control implant between her shoulders.
So her dose is 2 because she's big.
At the Detroit Zoo, there was an aardvark getting a birth control implant in her leg. Now there's a sentence one never expects to say. And then there was Dr. Atkinson's next patient. Oh my, hello. What a strange-looking creature you are. A furry fellow called a rock hyrax, who Dr. Atkinson says is somehow related to an elephant. What?
Yes, from an evolutionary standpoint, closest relative is the elephant.
Elephant or not, he too was getting a contraceptive implant.
It's about the size of a grain of rice, and this plunger is just going to push it out under the skin.
But not everyone thinks putting zoo animals on contraceptives is a good idea. Look at those eyes, they're huge. At the Copenhagen Zoo, which participates in a European genetic breeding program, they have a different philosophy. Here, as Bengt Holtz, Director of Research and Conservation, told us, they're against birth control. They think animals should be allowed to breed and raise their young just as they would in the wild. Do you think that there's an ethical issue when it comes to not allowing animals to breed?
Yeah, I think
raise
so.
their babies? You think it's ethical?
Yeah, I think it's ethical because that's actually a big part of their normal behavior. Parental behavior is a 24-hour job for 1 year, 2 years, 3 or 4 years, depending on the species, and we should not take that away.
But that means offspring who need new homes in other zoos once they reach adolescence. And it gets tricky.
The female cannot grow up here in this zoo because then she will mate with her father.
So the father would mate with his own child?
If she stayed here until she got mature, then he would start mating her.
It's not that difficult to place young female giraffes in other zoos because giraffes live in harem groups where one dominant male lives and breeds with several females. But for young males, it's tough, particularly for ones whose parents have bred well, so their genes are not considered valuable in the breeding program. That's what happened to Marius, and this is where our story takes that dark turn. Born at the Copenhagen Zoo 6 years ago, Marius needed to move when he reached the age of 2 and did what adolescent male giraffes do, start challenging their fathers, trying to take over the harem.
We could see that they had started fighting, and I mean, at the beginning it's just a little bit pushing around, but then at some stage he started getting scratches on the side because the father pushed him up against the tree and had really hit him hard. And if we have left him with the father, he would have killed him, I'm sure.
In the wild, this is when Marius would strike out on his own, a time when in nature many animals are killed by predators. But in the zoo, there was nowhere for him to go. And with no spots for him in the European breeding program, the zoo thought their only choice might be to euthanize him. You did have suggestions of what to do short of killing this beautiful animal. Some people said, why not just release him in the wild?
Yeah. We cannot just release a giraffe into the wild. It will be killed immediately because all space is occupied by other giraffes.
I know there was a very wealthy American who offered to take Marius.
But for what reason? He will keep a single giraffe, which is a social animal. That will be really bad welfare for this giraffe. We will never send an animal to a place where we won't have a good life.
So on a cold February morning, the zoo went ahead and ended Marius's life.
He was shot dead yesterday by a veterinarian.
Marius's death got worldwide attention and condemnation.
You should all be ashamed of yourselves.
Here you tell us that zoos are there to save the animals and protect animals.
Yeah,
and then the zoo kills.
But that's exactly what we do. We protect animals. We protect animal populations. And in order to protect animal populations and make sure that they are healthy also far into the future, we need sometimes to take some animals out of this population. Normally, we have nothing against killing healthy animals in the wild. I mean, in America, you hunt deer. In Denmark,
some people hunt deer.
Yes, but you eat meat. Most people eat meat, and meat comes from live animals.
If it's killing or contraception, isn't the contraception better than the killing?
No, I don't think so, because by contracepting the animals, you take away a huge amount of their natural behavior. And that's
as opposed to their life.
Decreasing their welfare. We need to give an animal a good life. No animal has an expectation of, I can become 20 years old or 10 years old or 2 years old. Animals live in the present. The important thing must be to have a good life as long as they live. Be it 2 months or 20 years, doesn't matter.
Killing a healthy animal is killing. It's not euthanasia.
Ron Kagan from the Detroit Zoo adamantly opposes culling. He says the focus on genetics and saving species shouldn't outweigh compassion.
We have assumed 100% responsibility for the life of those animals that live here. So for us, we're concerned with individual welfare, not just conservation.
Under pressure from animal rights activists and those who think animals shouldn't be locked up at all, zoos have tried to improve the quality of life of their animals, and Kagan's been a leader in that effort. Back in 2004, Detroit was the first American zoo to give up its elephants for ethical reasons, when Kagan says it became clear they were suffering in the cold climate. And he's worked to create larger and more natural habitats for the animals.
I want every individual animal that lives here to have a great life.
But he would say the same thing.
And
the
it's
good
pretty
life
hard.
includes pregnancy and giving birth and so forth.
Well, the idea that you say you should be able to have a baby but then you're going to kill it. I honestly, it's very hard for me to see how that works on any level. I don't want to kill healthy animals.
How about dissect them? The day Marius was killed, the zoo conducted a public autopsy, considered educational in Denmark, then fed what was left of his body to the zoo's lions.
The autopsy, done before the public, with little kids standing right there. Now, you got a lot of criticism for that.
Yeah, that's right. You have to realize, first of all, that this is normal in Denmark, that we do open dissections of animals. It's because we believe that animals are fascinating, but not only when they are wandering around on the savannah, but also if you open them up, because then suddenly you can explain some of the biology. For example, why is the heart of a giraffe that big, whereas yours and mine is just like a little apple, or big apple? That's of course because the heart has to pump the blood 5 meters up in the air. You cannot do that just by looking in a book. There was a big crowd watching. It was bitterly cold that day, but they stayed because they were so fascinated by it. And the kids, they really, I would claim, they loved it.
You fed Marius to the lions.
After we did the autopsy, we have a little bit more than 200 kilo of meat left. Should we just throw out this meat and then kill a cow in order to feed the lions so we take another good life? Or should we use the meat that was there already and feed it to the lions?
Why was that done before the public?
Why not public? Because we have nothing to hide. This is just natural that lions eat meat and lions eat giraffe.
You want the public to support not only your zoo, but other zoos. And people don't want to know.
Yes, they do. People want to see these things because that's normal and that's natural. And I think if we hide it, we do a really wrong thing because then we show people a wrong picture of what nature is really about.
While not all European zoos practice culling, it is permitted under European Zoo Association rules, which call it one of a range of scientifically valid solutions to the sustainability of animal populations in human care.
How do they sleep?
So what about zoos on this side of the Atlantic?
The AZA, the Association of Zoos and Aquariums, do they ban culling?
No.
In the United States? It's not banned?
No.
Is it done in the United States?
We don't do it.
I know you don't do it, but do other accredited
I don't know.
zoos? It's possible.
It's possible.
It's a touchy subject, but it is being discussed. 2 published papers in the journal Zoo Biology explore possible advantages to selective culling and point out problems with widespread use of contraception. Birth control, long-term, can have harmful side effects, and keeping animals from breeding can cause fertility problems later on if their genes are needed in the mix.
So in other words, it's all a trade-off.
I think that's exactly right. Life is filled with compromises. It's filled with compromises in the wild, and it's also true in a captive environment. So for instance, we want animals to have as much control and choice as possible in their daily lives. Having said that, they obviously don't have the choice to leave the zoo. And we don't let our tigers kill living animals, and that's a trade-off.
Speaking of trade-offs, we noticed that the Detroit Zoo has a young male giraffe over the age of 2 who's still living with his family because a transfer plan had fallen through. So why isn't he fighting with his father? Well, get this.
So what was your solution?
So he was castrated.
He's castrated.
Right. So that way he can stay with the group, and he's perfectly healthy and happy, and just like people's dogs and cats that are spayed and neutered. Is it ideal? No.
And we'll see what happens over time.
Back in Copenhagen, there are now 2 young giraffes, a half-sister and brother to Marius. We couldn't help but wonder about their future.
Is it possible that one or both will have to be culled?
For the male, it may be an option, yes.
Marius too.
Could be, yes. We still have 15 months to look for a place for him. But if necessary, we will do it, yes.
Human beings have lived with dogs for thousands of years. You'd think that after all that time, we'd have discovered all there is to know about them. But as we first reported last fall, it turns out that until recently, scientists didn't pay much attention to dogs. Dolphins have been studied for decades, apes and chimps as well, but dogs, with whom we share our lives, were never thought to be worthy of serious study. As a result, we know very little about what actually goes on inside dogs' brains. Do they really love us, or are dogs just licking us so they can get fed? How much of our language can they understand? Before you answer, we want you to meet Chaser, who's been called the smartest dog in the world.
Yeah, we're going to Wofford. Hoop. Good girl, good girl, good girl.
86-year-old retired psychology professor John Pelley and his border collie Chaser are inseparable.
We're almost there. We're almost there. Can you speak? Speak. Speak. Good girl, good girl.
Do you view Chaser as a family pet, as a friend? How do you see Chaser?
She's our child.
She's your child?
She's our child, a member of the family. Oh, yes. She comes first.
Many people think of their dogs as children, but John Pelley has been teaching her like a child as well. By assigning names to toys,
Okay, Chase.
Pelley has been helping Chaser learn words and simple sentences.
Take KG.
He's been teaching her up to 5 hours a day.
Yes. Tub.
5 days a week for the past 9 years.
My best metaphor is this is a 2-year-old toddler.
That's how you think about your dog, a 2-year-old toddler.
Yeah. She has the capabilities of a 2-year-old. Chicken, chicken, chicken. Where's chicken?
He's not kidding.
Yes, good girl.
Most 2-year-old toddlers
In tub.
know about 300 words.
Figure eight, figure eight. Good girl, that's figure eight.
Chaser's vocabulary
Good girl,
is 3 times that.
To tub.
She's learned the names of more than 1,000 toys. And all of those toys add up.
Wheel, yes, bring it out.
To show us Chaser's collection, Pelley brought us to his back porch. So these are all the toys in here?
Yes.
You got a chicken in here. Okay. Is it all right if I dump them out?
Please do, please do.
Okay. There are 800 cloth animals, 116 different balls, and more than 100 plastic toys. 1,022 toys in all, each with a unique name. So Chaser could recognize the names of every one of these toys.
That's true, that's true.
To prove it, Pelley cataloged the toys, and then, over the course of 3 years, gave Chaser hundreds of tests like this.
Chaser, find circle, find circle.
In every test, Chaser correctly identified 95% or more of the toys.
Find circle, Chase. Yeah.
The results were published in a peer-reviewed scientific journal, and a star was born.
How are you?
Good to see you.
I'm so glad to see you.
Chaser even landed a book deal.
You too.
But John Pelley didn't stop with the names of toys.
Nose KG, nose KG. Nose it, nose it. Good girl.
He's taught Chaser that nouns and verbs have different meanings
Paw it, paw it, paw
and
it.
can be combined in a variety of ways.
Take wheel. Do it, go, do it. Okay, out, out. Chase, take KG. Do it, good girl, good girl.
So she's actually understanding the difference between take, paw, putting her paw on something, and putting her nose on something.
Right, and that's what we're demonstrating.
All this learning has been possible, Pelley says, because of a breakthrough Chaser had when she was just a puppy. At a certain point, she realized that objects have names.
Right, it was an insight. It came to her.
How could you tell that she'd suddenly had that insight?
Well, it was in the 5th month, and she'd learned about 40 names, and the time necessary to work with her kept getting shorter and shorter.
She was starting to learn words faster and faster?
Yes.
It's the closest thing in animals we've seen to being like what young children do as they're learning words.
Brian Hare, an evolutionary anthropologist at Duke University, believes Chaser is the most important dog in the history of modern scientific research.
This is very serious science. We're not talking about stupid pet tricks where people have spent, hours trying to just, train a dog to do the same thing over and over. What's neat about what Chaser's doing is Chaser is learning tons, literally thousands of new things by using the same ability that kids use when they learn lots of words.
He's talking about what researchers call social inference, a capability humans, like Hare's son Luke, acquire around age 1. To demonstrate the concept, Hare hides a ball under one of these 2 cups.
Hey, looky guy, where is it? Can you get it? Can you get the ball?
Luke doesn't know which cup the ball is under.
Can you get it?
But when his father points, he makes an inference.
Hey, nice job.
You got it.
So what does that show you?
So when kids his age start understanding pointing, it's right when the foundations of what lead to language and culture start to develop.
Hey. It might look simple, but when Hare tried the same test with bonobos, great apes he studied for more than a decade, look what happened. Bonobos, our closest genetic relatives, can't do it.
You chose the wrong one!
But Hare discovered dogs can.
You ready? All right, I'm gonna hide in one of these two places.
This 2-year-old Labrador named Sisu has no trouble understanding the meaning of pointing.
Now, she doesn't know for sure which place you put it.
That's right. There's no way she could know, and I'm just gonna tell her where it is. Okay, Sisu. So that's really hard for a lot of animals, and that's what's really special about dogs is they're really similar to even human toddlers.
That's a level of thinking that people didn't really think dogs could do.
Right. I mean, there was no evidence until the last decade that dogs were capable of inferential reasoning. Absolutely not. So that's what's new. That's what's shocking is that of all the species, it's dogs that are showing a couple of abilities that are really important that allow humans to develop culture and language.
It's not surprising that dogs share characteristics with humans. After all, we've evolved alongside each other for more than 15,000 years. There are now some 80 million dogs in this country, more dogs than children. But for all the playing and petting, the companionship, we still know very little about their brains. Dr. Greg Burns, a physician and neuroscientist at Emory University, has studied the human brain for more than 2 decades. But 3 years ago, questions he had about his own dog inspired him to start looking at the canine brain.
It started out with the desire to know, really, what does my dog think of me? I love my dog, but do they reciprocate in any way? When they hear you come home, they start jumping around. Is it just because they expect you to feed them? Is this just a scam by the dogs?
Are dogs just big scammers?
Yeah.
To try and answer that question, Dr. Burns is doing something scientists have had a difficult time with. He's conducting brain scans on dogs while they're awake and unsedated. Inside the fMRI machine, they're trained to stay completely still.
What's around Tigger's head here?
The scanner makes a lot of noise. It's quite loud, and because dogs' hearing is more sensitive than ours, we have to protect their hearing just like ours. So we put earplugs and earmuffs and just wrap it all to just keep it in place.
Okay, now we go up.
Tigger certainly knows the drill.
That's good.
Once in the machine, he lies down and doesn't move. These scans are giving Dr. Burns the first glimpse at how a dog's brain actually works.
So these are slices of Tigger's brain that you're seeing?
Yeah, exactly. So we're slicing from top to bottom. We analyze them later to see which parts increase in response to the different signals.
Mm-hmm.
While in the scanner, the dogs smell cotton swabs with different scents. First, the underarm sweat of a complete stranger. Next, the sweat of their owner. As Dr. Burns expected, when the dogs sniffed the swabs, the part of their brain associated with smell, an area right behind the nose, activated. It didn't matter what the scent was. But it was when the dogs got a whiff of their owner's sweat that another area of the brain was stimulated, the caudate nucleus, or reward center. Dr. Burns believes that means the dog is experiencing more than the good feeling that comes with a meal. It shows the dog is recognizing somebody extremely important to them. It's the same area in a human brain that activates when we listen to a favorite song or anticipate being with someone we love.
So just by smelling the sweat of their owner, it triggers something in a much stronger way than it does with a stranger.
Right, which means that it's a positive feeling, a positive association.
Watch YouTube videos of dogs welcoming home returning service members, and it's easy to see the bond between dogs and their owners. Brian Hare says there's even more proof of that bond. It's found in our bloodstreams.
We know that when dogs and humans make eye contact, that actually releases what's known as the love hormone, oxytocin, in both the dog and the human.
It turns out oxytocin, the same hormone that helps new mothers bond with their babies, is released in both dogs and humans when they play, touch, or look into one another's eyes.
Thank you very much.
What we know now is that when dogs are actually looking at you, they're essentially hugging you with their eyes.
Really?
Yes. And so it's not just that when a dog is making a lot of eye contact with you, that they're just trying to get something from you. It actually probably is just really enjoyable for them because they get an oxytocin or they get an uptick in this love hormone too.
All these new discoveries about dogs have led Brian Hare to create a science-based website called Dognition, where owners can learn to play games to test their dog's brain power.
So you're allowing people to do an intelligence test for their dog?
That's exactly right. And the idea, though, is that there's not one type of intelligence. We help you measure things like how your dog communicates, how empathic your dog is your dog cunning, is your dog actually capable of abstract thought, like reasoning.
So there are different kinds of intelligence for dogs, just like with humans?
Absolutely. And so just like some humans are good at English and others are good at math, it's the same for dogs.
When Hare tested his own dog, a mixed breed named Tassie, he was surprised by what he learned.
What I found out was that I had somebody sleeping in my bed that I didn't even know.
Really?
And I didn't know my dog doesn't really rely on its working memory. So if I'm saying sit and stay, I no longer have to wonder why my dog wanders off. He like literally forgot.
So your dog's not the sharpest of dogs?
He did great on communication. He's very communicative.
So he could basically be a TV anchor, is what you're saying.
Yes. Fetch shirt. Fetch shirt. There we go.
If you're wondering how Chaser did on Brian Hare's intelligence tests, she was off the charts on reasoning and memory. Not surprising, perhaps, considering Chaser is a border collie. Dogs bred specifically for their ability to understand how farmers want their sheep herded.
Is Chaser just like an Einstein of dogs?
So that's really fun. Is Chaser somehow special? And I think the idea actually is that no. I mean, when Dr. Pelley chose Chaser, he just randomly took her out of a litter.
Drop, drop.
What's special is that he spent so much time playing these games to help her learn words. But are there lots of chasers out there? Absolutely.
On your mark, get set, go.
There's going to be a lot of people who see this and are jealous of your relationship with Chaser.
Well, start working with your dog more.
Yeah, you're so sweet.
If you've ever lost a dog to disease, it may well have been cancer. Some 4 million dogs in the U.S. are diagnosed with it every year, often the same kinds of cancers humans get. We share many of the same genes with our canine companions, and for cancer research, that's an opportunity scientists are trying to make the most of. It's called Comparative Oncology. Now funded in part by the White House's Cancer Moonshot Initiative, doctors and scientists are studying naturally developing cancers, mostly in dogs, and using what they learn to speed potential treatments to them and us. A dog show might seem like an odd place to conduct cancer research.
Can I see your face?
But this summer in Norwalk, Connecticut, that's where we met scientists from the National Institutes of Health, swabbing and collecting DNA samples from all sorts of breeds.
Oh, awesome.
They've been doing this for nearly 30 years and have collected about 40,000 samples so far.
Every few weeks we're at a dog show.
Leading the team is Elaine Ostrander, a senior geneticist at the NIH.
I always thought the National Institutes of Health study human diseases. Why is there a scientist at the NIH studying dogs?
We are studying human disease and we're doing it through dogs. And so dogs live in our world. They get all the same diseases we do. They eat our food. They're exposed to the same environmental pollutants. But they also have all the same genes that we do. And they have mutations in those genes that make them susceptible to everything you and I get, whether it's diabetes or cancer or neuromuscular diseases. Everything humans get, dogs get.
Ostrander says it's easier to study genes in dogs than humans because for the last 200 years they've been bred to emphasize specific traits. That's why they have all these distinct noses and tails and sizes, from Great Danes to Chihuahuas.
So before Victorian times, dogs were pretty much the same?
So there was some variation. We know that from fossil and archaeologic records, but almost all the variation you see running around in the rings today, that's all happened in the last 200 years.
It's really incredible that there's so much variety in that short time.
Right, so that means it's probably going to be a really small number of genes responsible for most of the major differences.
It turns out just one gene determines if a dog has cream-colored hair or black. Other genes determine long hair or short. And Ostrander's team at the NIH has discovered some physical traits in dogs, like ear position, hold surprising clues about human health.
This was a study looking at prick ears versus floppy ears. And that's due to a mutation in one gene called MSRB3.
So just a mutation in one gene.
One gene, isn't that amazing?
Makes the difference between pointy ears and floppy ears.
Isn't that amazing? But what's really interesting about this story is that when this gene is perturbed or more dramatically mutated in humans, we get a form of deafness.
Really?
Yeah.
Ostrander told us some of the most promising genetic research in dogs involves cancer. Some breeds get certain types of cancers more often, making it easier for researchers to locate some of the genes responsible. Scottish Terriers, for instance, are about 20 times more likely to get bladder cancer than the average mixed-breed dog.
Now, if I were to look at a group of humans with bladder cancer, the story would be so much more complex. There would be different genes in different populations, there'd be different mutations, different contributions of environmental effects. So when I look in one breed, I get much simpler stories.
Dogs are diagnosed with many of the same cancers found in humans: lymphoma, melanoma, brain and breast cancer, and the deadly bone cancer, osteosarcoma.
And then what about the chemotherapy? How did he do with that?
University of Pennsylvania professor and veterinarian Nicola Mason oversees a national network of comparative oncology trials funded by the White House's Cancer Moonshot Initiative. She showed us just how similar osteosarcoma looks in dogs and people.
So what you can see, there's lots of purple dots here. These are the nuclei of the cancerous cells. They look identical.
Yeah, even a professional looking under a microscope would not be able to tell the difference between a dog with osteosarcoma and a human.
Correct. Incredibly similar.
Osteosarcoma is aggressive and malignant. More than 10,000 dogs in the United States are estimated to get it each year, but only about 1,000 people are, mostly children and young adults. Christy Gomes was diagnosed in 2020 when she was 11.
Which was the leg that was hurting?
Left.
So it was hurting up in your thigh?
It was up in here.
Christy was used to getting bruised on the soccer field, so she and her mom, Kathy Fetter, chalked it up to a sports injury. But after months of physical therapy, her doctor discovered osteosarcoma. That white mass had eroded most of Christy's thigh bone.
She comes in and she goes, Christy has a cancerous tumor in her femur. And I was like, what?
And I'm not like a crier, so I think I was processing it, and as I was processing it, I saw her cry, so then I started crying.
And then she was like, wait, I have cancer?
Doctors removed the remaining bone and replaced it with this 9-inch metal rod.
Good job.
Months of grueling chemotherapy withered Christy to 72 pounds. But her pediatric oncologist, Dr. Alyssa Rubin, told us the cancer came back, this time in Christy's lungs.
Patients, once their tumor comes back, are at really high risk. Probably 80% of the time will get new tumors.
Have there been a lot of new treatments for osteosarcoma?
Unfortunately, no. We've been using the same chemotherapy for about the last 60 years or so.
Really? Is that because it's a rare form of cancer?
Yeah, it's harder to study because there's smaller numbers of patients to study in large trials. And also, since it's rare, not a lot of funding goes to a lot of trials for it.
But there were trials in pet dogs of an experimental immunotherapy treatment for osteosarcoma that began in 2012, led by Dr. Nicola Mason, using the bacteria Listeria.
This is Listeria, causes food poisoning. This particular Listeria has been genetically modified so that it is far less virulent.
The Listeria has also been modified to contain a specific protein called HER2 that's found on some osteosarcoma cells. Once injected into the dog's bloodstream, the Listeria awakens their immune systems, making them feel sick. It also triggers killer immune cells to patrol the body and destroy the cancerous cells. Sandy, a 9-year-old golden retriever, joined a nationwide trial in 2018. She's had her front leg amputated because of osteosarcoma. We met her this past August with her owner, Matt Olson. During the trial, Dr. Mason told us Sandy's immune system reacted to the Listeria just as she'd hoped.
Her body temperature started to increase, peaked around about 4 hours, and then started to drop down again. We sort of want to see that because it tells us that the immunotherapy is in fact stimulating her immune response, which is what we want to happen.
When Sandy was first diagnosed, her life expectancy with the standard care of amputation and chemotherapy was around a year. But that was 4 years ago.
There's no sign of cancer.
No.
And you've had 4 great years with her.
Yeah.
Did she get extra treats when she got through it all?
She got everything. she still does,
She
man.
does. I bet she does.
Dr. Mason believes studying and treating naturally occurring cancers in pet dogs is more promising compared to using lab mice, which have to be artificially given cancer.
What we're trying to do is find a better way to determine which are the best treatments to take forward into the human.
This is not giving dogs rare forms of cancer and then studying them and testing them in a lab.
Exactly. So these are naturally occurring cancers. These are clinical trials, just as you or I would go onto a clinical trial if we had a cancer. And we do exactly the same in the veterinary field.
Results from the first Listeria trial in pet dogs were encouraging, showing the dogs tolerated the immunotherapy and that it significantly increased duration of survival time. Those results were submitted to the Food and Drug Administration.
Let's just confirm your birthday.
Last year, the FDA approved a phase 2 clinical trial using modified Listeria to treat young adults and children like Christy Gomes, who have recurrent osteosarcoma that spread to their lungs.
All right, do you want cartoons on the TV?
Yes, please.
We were with Christy in August at Children's Hospital of Orange County when she received her third Listeria infusion.
That star in the dark circle, that's the needle going into your vein. Kind of cool, huh?
First, she was given medications that made her sleepy.
When the infusion's actually happening, do you remember it afterward, or do you basically sleep through it?
Just sleep. And then when I wake up, it hits like a truck.
Is that right?
Yeah.
You get a headache.
Bad headache. And nauseous. And I hate nauseous and headache. Two things I don't like is two things guaranteed.
Once she was dozing, the Listeria started dripping into Christy's IV.
So it started now.
It has.
It's kind of amazing to think that you're both on the cutting edge of medicine.
I know. And I don't think she realizes how important this is.
An hour later, that truck Christy told us about, it hit her hard. But similar to what happened to Sandy, the golden retriever, the Listeria appeared to awaken Christy's immune system. And after 10 minutes, her headache got better. A few hours later, she was able to leave the hospital.
It's so amazing to me how similar humans' and dogs' immune response is.
We're very similar. I think perhaps more so than we might like to admit.
The National Cancer Institute is spending more than $20 million to analyze cancer samples from pet dogs all over the country and oversee comparative oncology trials to improve treatments in humans and dogs. One of their targets is brain cancer. This is Otto, a 7-year-old boxer who belongs to Dan Heffron. Otto was diagnosed with a deadly brain tumor in 2021.
Take the pointer finger on your left hand and touch your nose.
And this is Julie Hinseth, who's 59. She was diagnosed in 2020 with a similar, nearly incurable brain cancer, glioblastoma. She's had surgery, radiation, and chemotherapy, but the cancer came back. Julie and Otto enrolled in clinical trials at the University of Minnesota that use virtually the same experimental treatment. A neurosurgeon and veterinary surgeon teamed up to treat and operate on Otto and other dogs with brain cancer, and then shared their data about safety and dosing with a neuro-oncologist treating Julie and others.
Hi, Otto.
Julie, along with her husband Doug and daughter Kelly, met Otto for the first time last spring. 2 patients, similar cancers, different species.
What's it like to meet Otto?
Oh. I'm crying now.
Inflammation in Julie's brain makes it difficult for her to speak.
I never thought I would be having a conversation with a person and a dog who were having the same treatment.
Who have the same
It's incredible.
Yeah. I didn't realize until now.
Yeah, and I didn't until after his first surgery.
Yeah.
What sort of an impact that he was going to have, not only for him, but other dogs and humans.
But 2 months after that meeting, Otto's symptoms worsened. It appeared his cancer returned. Dan took him for a final swim in his favorite river and then said goodbye to the dog he called his best friend and a medical pioneer.
Good, Otto.
Julie Hinseth's symptoms have now worsened as well. She stopped taking part in the trial and is spending time with her family. She told us she's grateful to have been part of an innovative interspecies battle to find new treatments.
I helped fight cancer.
It gives you satisfaction to know that you helped fight cancer.
Yeah.
I've had 2 dogs who have had cancer, and the idea that that cancer can be studied and treated and it can have an impact on humans is incredible.
Maybe the key, right?
Yeah, dogs may hold the key.
Christy Gomes, who's now well into her freshman year in high school, says she agrees.
We have to have more common things than we think.
It's not just that they need us for food and
It's not
that
just that
there's
we're
a real
besties,
connection.
it's that we have to have like more connection than that.
Christy's last scan showed no signs of cancer. She continues to get immunotherapy every 3 weeks.
Benny, come here.
Between treatments and homework, you'll find her with her Yorkie Benny, a gift from her mom. One more dog that's helping her in her recovery.
Not since the dinosaurs disappeared have animals been going extinct as fast as they are now. Entire species vanish every year. And while our hearts are moved by the plight of the biggest, whales or elephants, the fiercest, tigers, even sharks, and certainly the cutest, like pandas, what about the slowest? The turtle and its land-loving cousin, the tortoise, have been plodding along, slow and steady, for more than 200 million years. But their hard shells are little protection from human predators and a booming illegal animal trade. It may be too late to save many of them, but they have found an unlikely protector in a man named Eric Good. Some of New York City's hottest hotels, restaurants, and bars are owned by Eric Good.
Hello. I need to say hello to people that I haven't said hello to. Hi.
That's made him rich and comfortable with the glitterati and fashionistas. But behind the scenes, he caters to a far less glamorous clientele, endangered turtles and tortoises. How did the whole interest, if not obsession, with turtles and tortoises begin?
As a child at 6, I was given a small Herman's tortoise. And that created a budding interest in the natural world and in reptiles and snakes and lizards and in my hard-shelled friends that I just fell in love with. And so it was a progression.
It's an obsession that takes him as far from the glitz of the New York scene as imaginable. He wades through swamps, turns over rocks, wrangles exotic snakes and other reptiles as he searches for his first love.
What a beautiful tortoise. This is our first Samobates tentorius trimeni.
Turtles and tortoises trace back before the dinosaurs, but now today, about half of the over 300 species are headed toward extinction, largely because of habitat loss and an insatiable market for them, particularly in Asia, as food, medicine, rare collector's items, and pets. How big a business is the turtle-tortoise trade?
China alone is probably in the hundreds of millions of dollars. This trade flourishes because the payoff is huge and the chance of getting prosecuted and incarcerated are very low.
If you're going to be in something illicit, this is the safest or one of the safest.
And that's a tragedy.
Eric Good is spending $1 million a year of his own money to fight the trade in places like Madagascar, an island off the coast of Africa that's vastly undeveloped.
People are so poor. And some of these villages make less than $1 a day, or it's basically subsistence living. And there just simply isn't the political will of the country to really enforce, what's going on with their natural heritage, whether it's tortoises or other wildlife.
Fly over Madagascar and you can see why conservationists say it's bleeding to death. Rivers run red with soil erosion from logging and slash-and-burn agriculture that have wiped out animal habitats and 90% of the country's forests. And yet, because of its isolation, Madagascar is a paradise of plants and animals found nowhere else, like the wide-eyed lemurs, chameleons that sparkle with color, geckos that hide in plain sight, more than 200 kinds of frogs, and 5 species of rare turtles and tortoises. Eric was taking us on a trek to find the fastest disappearing animal in Madagascar, the plowshare tortoise, whose shrinking habitat is so deep in the wilderness, it's only accessible by boat.
This tortoise is one of the world's most endangered animals. It is the world's most endangered tortoise, and it has an incredibly high price on its head. Asian countries love gold, and this is a gold tortoise. And so literally, these are like gold bricks that one can pick up and sell.
We were following the path the poachers take, landing on a deserted beach. And off we went on a long hike. We walked through scrub brush in blazing heat for almost an hour.
The sun starts to go up too high, they just disappear.
The once plentiful plowshare population here, he says, could be down to as few as 300 adults.
And this is where the guards are based.
Good has helped hire around 40 locals to go out and find the tortoises before the poachers do.
We have to be on a team of many people.
Different lines, 30 feet apart, yeah. All right, let's go.
We lined up the way police do when they search for a missing person. And by midday, with a lot of help, we got lucky.
They found one.
Oh, look at that. How did you ever find it?
Wow, oh, it's a beautiful female. So this is just a perfect female. Now this tortoise is a crown jewel. This is a beautiful animal.
Look at her.
Yeah, and you can see this incredible domed shell that's unique with this tortoise. No turtle has this shell, like an army helmet. This is a very, very valuable tortoise.
Based on his own research, Good says a tortoise like this could sell for $60,000 in Asia. To try and stop the trafficking, he and his colleagues have begun doing the unthinkable. It's a drill. Oh my God.
Yeah. He has to be very careful not to hit the bone because then we'll draw blood. So he's going just that very carefully, 1/16 of an inch into the shell.
They want to leave an indelible gash, a scar, that makes the tortoises undesirable to collectors. I have to tell you, watching Angelo do this, it's painful. It is painful to watch.
Yeah, no, it's very hard. But I think we're at a point where we're down to so few animals. There's so few of these tortoises left that we have to really take extreme measures.
Scarring the shells of these animals, defacing them, etching. Is that working? Can you tell yet?
It's too soon to know if that's working. It breaks your heart to have to do that to this beautiful, beautiful shell. I mean, you can compare it maybe to chainsawing off a rhinoceros's horn to save a rhino. I mean, how horrible is that?
To show us what he's up against, Eric took us to a market in a small city called Mahajunga, where we saw, with our hidden camera, shells of endangered tortoises out in the open, on display for sale. And soon we were being offered live tortoises.
What is this?
This is a spider tortoise from southern Madagascar. This is critically endangered, and the Chinese sometimes just puncture the shell just to eat the liver out of this tortoise.
One of the vendors showed up with something in a plastic bag.
What is it?
It was a radiated tortoise on the endangered species list. Asking price, just $400. We were even offered a plowshare tortoise if we paid up front and waited several days. But that would have meant breaking Madagascar and international laws against smuggling an endangered animal. How hard was it for you to not take that tortoise and save its life? If you leave it behind, who knows where it's going to end up?
It's incredibly frustrating. This animal is from such a tiny geography. You'd think you could wall it in and protect it.
There is one place in Madagascar that is trying to wall them in and protect them behind locks and razor wire. This national park deep in a forest. Are these automatic rifles?
They certainly are, yep.
Richard Lewis is with the British conservation group Durrell, which runs this refuge and breeding center.
Be careful of the youngsters here.
They're all over the place.
Yeah, just be careful.
Oh, here's some.
Watch where you step and then come on over. These are all adult males.
Look at them. Do you know how old they are?
This could be 50 years old, 100 years old, 150, 200 years old.
I mean, this is the longest lived animal on the planet.
Their longevity is one of the reasons they're so valuable. Asian collectors believe owning one confers long life on them. The black market trade is now so lucrative that crime syndicates are involved. The center was robbed in the late 1990s in what was called one of the heists of the century. So people actually broke into this compound, the breeding center, with all the security and stole
75 youngsters and 2 adults. They stole, at that moment in time, it was half of the youngsters we'd ever bred.
Since then, with the help of Eric Good, the population of plowshares here has rebounded.
This is the female enclosure.
These girls are responsible for producing 300 offspring, 300 animals that you're looking at in this entire enclosure.
Very few people have ever seen them actually produce offspring, even here. But as we were just about to leave, one of the females wandered off, and to everyone's surprise, began to dig a nest for laying eggs. Richard, have you ever seen this before?
No.
You have never
Not
seen?
me personally, no. It's the luck of the draw, as it were.
Being a tortoise, the work was very slow and very plodding.
Yeah, it's remarkable. You think those legs are just these stubby elephantine feet, but they're very good at cupping the soil, digging this incredible little hole.
Yeah, and she could be, what, 60, 70 years old?
Yeah, 100 years old.
It took her almost an hour, and then...
Oh, there's the egg.
Oh, my God.
Oh, my
Is she
God.
going
Now
to
it's
do another one?
Yep. Oh, there it goes. There it goes. Number 2. This is what you work for.
Yep.
And even more so when the little tortoise, when the hatchling comes out, you feel like you've broken a secret code.
Good wants to emulate this kind of success back in the United States, with not just plowshares, but dozens of other species. He has his own breeding center in the mountains outside of Los Angeles that he began with 150 turtles and tortoises given to him for safekeeping by the Bronx Zoo.
They were trucked across the United States, and they were the first guests in my tortoise hotel.
Each species is pampered like a guest at one of Good's hotels, with fresh-cut flowers, salad greens, and a tortoise smoothie blended with organic milk.
Each species needs a different ecosystem. Like this tortoise, for example, is from Burma, and this is biologically extinct in the wild. And these guys need to be kept warm and very high humidity.
He now has 680 animals from 30 endangered species.
This is a turtle from India and Bangladesh, and maybe a little bit into Pakistan.
And these turtles that elsewhere would be on the menu.
It's called the golden coin turtle, probably one of the top 25 most endangered turtles in the world.
And young Galapagos tortoises that'll grow to 400 pounds.
These were bred in Texas at a zoo, and they've been raised here.
Don't come for my toes. But Eric Good says he doesn't want any of his guests to stay too long.
Ideally, we'd like to send these animals back to the wild.
Why would you send them back? There's no protection for them back in the wild.
It may be too soon to send a lot of them back.
And can you? I mean, let's be realistic.
I don't know yet, but I think it's important to show that we're not just bringing animals into captivity and keeping them there forever.
For now, he's fulfilling his dream by protecting 11 plowshares and trying to breed more. Last year, he hatched 250 other tortoises and turtles. Eric Good is like Noah, building a safe haven for, in some cases, the last of these animals on Earth.
There are more than 75,000 wild horses roaming public land in the West. Wild horses are the descendants of domesticated horses, the first brought here by Spanish explorers 500 years ago. By 1971, their numbers were dwindling, and Congress stepped in, passing a law to protect this romantic fragment of our history. It worked, almost too well. Today, federal land managers say the number of wild horses is nearly 3 times what it should be, and left unchecked, their population can double every 5 years. So when we heard about a program in Wyoming designed to rein in the wild horses and an unlikely group of men, we headed west. It's hard to imagine anything surviving on this stretch of badlands in northern Wyoming. Sagebrush blankets the high desert all the way to the Rocky Mountains. But in this empty quarter of the cowboy state is a thundering herd of mustangs. Untouched, wild, and breathtakingly beautiful. But wild horses can also wreck the rangelands they roam. Government land managers say in the West, wild horses are competing with cattle and wildlife for increasingly scarce water and food, and their overpopulation often further strains the environment. So the Federal Bureau of Land Management regularly rounds up wild horses, mainly by using small helicopters to locate, capture, and truck them off to corrals or enclosed pastures like this one. A horse can live for about 20 years, and most of these horses will remain here until they die. The Wind River Wild Horse Sanctuary outside Lander, Wyoming, is run by Jess Oldham and his family.
Talk about the horses that are here. For most of them, this is it, right?
Yes, ma'am. We have the 225 long-term residents and
Long-term residents.
Long-term residents.
Sounds like a nursing home.
That's what I call them. I mean,
Yeah.
they're part of our family, and they're going to be here long-term.
And there they go.
Yes, ma'am.
The 1,400-acre facility is on an Indian reservation. The Oldhams are one of dozens of contractors paid by the government to feed and care for mustangs after they've been removed from the wild. Activists want the horses to remain free.
Why not just let the wild horses be wild and run?
The harsh reality is ecosystems are a delicate balance of each species coexisting together in the environment. There is a limited amount of resources in grass, in water, and the wild horses are a very dominant species. They're smart, they're fast, they eat a lot of food, and they need to be properly managed.
Keeping count of all those horses is Holly Waddell, the division chief of the program that oversees wild horses for the Bureau of Land Management.
How many wild horses is the government now caring for?
So we are currently caring for over 57,000 wild horses.
And caring for them is not inexpensive.
No. The cost of care for wild horses in our off-range corrals and pastures was 2/3 of our budget last year, which was a little over $70 million.
$70 million to care for the wild horses.
Taxpayer dollars.
To relieve some of the burden on taxpayers, last year the Bureau says 3,742 Mustangs came off the government rolls through an incentive program that pays individuals $1,000 to adopt one. Wild horses attract relatively few takers, but these horses did, picked for their youth, balance, and temperament, that are sent to be trained in, of all places, prisons like the Wyoming Honor Farm. It's a 640-acre compound of tidy buildings, manicured lawns, cattle, and enough hay to feed them. It may look like a dude ranch, but this is a state-run minimum security prison with felons working the land and the horses. There are no towers or armed guards. A simple 4-foot cattle fence marks the perimeter between the prison and the town of Riverton, Wyoming.
You know, Wyoming has a tendency to do things a little differently because we're a smaller state, and I think it's one of those things, until you see it, you can't actually believe it yourself.
Curtis Moffett has spent his entire career in corrections. He's the warden on the farm, and about the only one here who doesn't wear cowboy boots to work.
The thing that struck me, when you drive up, you see the 4-foot high cattle fence. What's to stop an inmate from making a run for it or riding off into the sunset?
Realistically, himself. Most of these guys are at the end of their sentence, so most of them don't want to destroy that or, catch another number, do another 5 years or so. It's on them to make sure that they're going to do things the right way.
Most inmates have earned the right to be here, transferred for good behavior from more restrictive state prisons. And each day, about 30 inmates report to work in a maze of chutes and pens with wild horses weighing up to 1,000 pounds. Their job is to transform these Mustangs from wild burdens of the state into riding horses that can fetch thousands at auction.
These guys are here to do their time, but it's really about changing their life, put a change in them in a positive direction.
Travis Shootman is the cowboy in charge. He's the manager of the farm.
Come on, beauty queens.
Shootman spent his life teaching the art of training horses. It shows in a stride kinked by old fractures.
Have you ever had a halter on this horse, Mr. Sukor?
Never.
And a voice both firm and calm, as much for the inmates as the horses.
Do the rope-a-dope and throw the rope into your hand. Do not get kicked.
It takes time to train a wild horse, but Shootman says there's nothing special about how it starts.
You walk them in there like you just kind of rip off the Band-Aid and a human goes in there. Don't chase him.
Whoa.
What's the next step?
Then you teach them to yield the pressure, so you stop the forward movement. Teach them that if they move forward towards you, the pressure goes away. And then from there, you get to where you can touch them, you get to where you can pet them, introduce a halter, get them halter broke, and then you have that trust. Like they understand if they give up their right of flight to stay with you, there's some trust there.
Are you talking about the horses or the
The
inmates?
horses.
Get going, hey.
We are in the people business, and helping the horses is extra, but the guys really learn a lot of life lessons from the horses. They learn to try, they learn to not lie to themselves about their feelings, they learn to control whether it's the highest of high emotions or the lowest of low emotions.
No one here breaks a horse. The method used at the farm is called gentling. Force is replaced by patience, persistence, and an even keel.
Good job.
In any pen, on any day, you can see it play out. A ballet in dusty boots. A delicate dance of inches, repeated 100 times over. Days in the making for this, the first human touch. Next door, a Mustang in full gallop. A runaway train yields and stops on command.
There you go. You got a good win.
We're watching all these things step by step by step, but this doesn't happen overnight.
No, sometimes it'll take 4 weeks, sometimes it'll take 4 months to do these steps, and a wild horse takes a little bit longer sometimes.
Michael Davis has been riding horses his whole life. He's serving 15 to 20 years for voluntary manslaughter. He's eligible for parole in a little over 3 years.
If you're mad, if you're scared, that horse knows before you ever even touch him. You know, that how they know, I don't. You have to control your feelings considerably with the horse because it is so easy for them to pick up on your mood.
So you're good at controlling your feelings with the horse, but with people, how are you doing?
Not real great.
We're still working
I have
on
my
that.
moments. I'm still working on it, but we're getting better.
Davis is an old cowboy and one of only a few inmates here who can handle this. This horse has never had a man on its back until now.
Hey. Whoa.
A remarkable skill that can't be acquired without a few scars.
I've got broken ankle, a separated shoulder, a broken collarbone, ditches in my head, broken hand, fingers, lots of fingers.
What's the program taught you? What's it meant to you?
A little piece of freedom. I mean, I'm wearing boots and jeans instead of hospital scrubs. And I mean, it's hot out here, but it's a good hot. It's as close to being outside as I can get until I get outside.
Out here, it's easy to forget this is a prison with 300 inmates under the watchful eye of Warden Moffat.
People at home will say, like, these guys are felons. They've done terrible things, committed awful crimes, ruined families. Why should they be allowed to be out here, to be trusted, to be working with these horses?
We don't provide the sentence to them. We don't provide the punishment for them. The judge decided all that. Our job is to supervise them while they're in here. And hopefully return them to society where they're responsible individuals, where they can be law-abiding citizens. I think this program goes a long way to do that. And I want to make sure they get out and we can believe that they're going to be successful and they aren't going to reoffend.
You want to make sure, right, that the horses aren't returned and the inmates don't return.
Right.
Is that fair to say?
Right.
In Wyoming, the recidivism rate is below 30%. And if you're wondering about that 4-foot cattle fence, well, the warden says in the last 22 years, fewer than 10 inmates have made a run for it.
Come back down to a walk.
Staying on the right side of the fence is not lost on Peyton Sukor, an inmate serving 7 to 10 years for aggravated assault. He transferred from a maximum security prison a year ago and came here with no experience working with horses.
What's it like to step into a pen the first time with a wild 800-pound horse?
Adrenaline, heart-pounding excitement. But I was excited to do it because once you get a horse to go the direction you want and then come and join up to you and you turn around and he's right there and it's like, wow, this animal this connection, this feeling, I can't explain it.
What has this taught you about yourself?
It's taught me responsibility. It's taught me what I want to do for a career when I get out of here. And this makes you look at life a whole different way. Whoa.
And Sucor's patience and feel are paying off. At auction, a gelding like this one could sell for thousands, but it's not without a little heartache.
Is it hard to see them go?
It is, but at the same time, we're not doing this just for us. We're doing it for them too. It's a second chance for them as well.
Have you ridden him without a tie down?
Yes, ma'am.
This September, the Honor Farm held its second auction of the year. Hundreds of buyers came to the prison from all over the country to inspect these horses and query their trainers, a little like kicking the tires on a car lot.
Hit $500 now, make it 5, anybody put them at 5.
Then each Mustang takes the main stage, trotting and loping, sold to the highest bidder.
Sold out, 2,500. All right, here we go.
In all, 34 horses fetched $65,000 for the Bureau of Land Management, an achievement almost as good as the look on the inmates' faces. But remember Michael Davis, the old cowboy who couldn't be bucked? We noticed he wasn't at the auction. The warden told us he was suspended for not getting along with others. Gentling a horse and rehabilitating the man don't always happen on the same clock. By high noon, every Mustang had a new home. And for this wild bunch, gentling has its virtues.
I think I know the answer to this. If you were a betting man, would you bet a psychologist is quicker to change the behavior of a man, a doctor, a therapist, or a horse?
I think a horse, 100%. And that's just purely Travis Shootman talking, but the horses are a major role in what betters those men. They can teach you life lessons every step of every way. Teach you that you got something in you that you didn't think you had. They can teach you that it's okay to be afraid, but it can still be done. Nothing's impossible. There's so many life lessons.
We very nearly lost one of the wonders of the world. The humpback whale was efficiently slaughtered until there were only a few thousand left. But in one of the great success stories in conservation, the humpback is making a comeback. It's a good thing, too, because what we've learned about them lately makes the humpback one of the most fascinating animals ever to grace the earth. There are many species of whales, and one by one they're coming off the endangered species list. Whale hunting is rare today, but there is still a place on the high seas where there is a battle to eliminate the last vestiges of whaling. There, we found a man who has risked life and limb to end any threat to whales once and for all. Hang on. You're watching the ramming of a Japanese whaling ship by a combative conservation group led by American Paul Watson. He's trying to stop the transfer of a minke whale the Japanese just killed to the factory ship that will cut it up. Commercial whaling is banned by international agreements, but the Japanese and a few others are still launching harpoons. These scenes were shot for the Animal Planet series Whale Wars. And these scenes were shot by the whalers themselves, who say this is evidence that Watson is nothing more than a pirate. The Japanese obtained an international arrest warrant for him, so for the last year, this conservationist, or pirate, has lived on the world's oceans, unable to set foot on land. We are headed out to international waters where Watson lives on a ship beyond the reach of the law. But before he would meet with us, we had to agree that we wouldn't say where we are or even what ocean this is. Suffice to say, it involved several airplanes and many thousands of miles. Toward the end of that journey, Watson sent this trimaran to pick us up. This boat once set the speed record for circumnavigating the Earth. He named it for an actress who is a supporter, but to us it looked more Darth Vader than Bridget Bardot. Watson came to the Bardot from a floating hideout that we agreed not to show. He is one of the founders of Greenpeace, and now at the age of 62, he calls his new armada Sea Shepherd.
Paul, thanks for seeing us.
Oh, thank you. The simple fact is this: if the oceans die, we die. Sea Shepherd was set up to uphold those international laws and regulations protecting our oceans.
But why is that your job? Countries enforce laws. Why are you doing this?
Well, I just do not see the political will on the part of these governments to do anything.
But that makes you a vigilante. You're deciding on your own that you're going to enforce these laws. What gives you the right?
Because I want to survive, and I want to make sure that my children survive, and I'm not going to sit back and watch the oceans be destroyed because governments don't have the political or economic will to uphold these laws.
The whaling ban makes an exception for research, and the Japanese proclaim that exception in tall letters on their ships. They set their own quotas, about 900 minkies, 50 fin whales, and 50 humpbacks. These are minkies, and even though the Japanese reserve the right to kill humpbacks, they haven't, according to the International Whaling Commission.
There is no scientific basis for what they're doing. We have seen them take a whale onto the factory vessel. There's no scientists there. There's nobody measuring anything. They simply cut them up, send them down below, and package them. So this is not science. This is bogus.
The International Court of Justice in The Hague will be deciding whether Japan's whaling is really for research or should be stopped. But while the whaling continues, Sea Shepherd fouls the Japanese plan with rope to catch their propellers. The Japanese fire back with water and ear-splitting sirens. Sea Shepherd throws stink bombs. The Japanese return concussion grenades.
You called Sea Shepherd, which you founded, the most aggressive, no-nonsense conservation organization in the world. And you said, quote, "I don't believe in protests. That is far too submissive." What do you mean?
Well, protesting is sort of like, please, please, please don't do that, but they'll do it anyway. They just ignore you. So protest is submissive. We're not a protest organization. We're an interventionist organization. We intervene against illegal activities.
But this is what happened recently when Sea Shepherd tried to intervene. The whaler kept coming and sheared the bow off of Watson's $2 million boat, which eventually sank. No one was seriously hurt. Watson claims he has cut the Japanese catch because of these tactics, the same tactics that the Japanese say are illegal.
And you're in sort of a prison, aren't you?
Well, it's a pretty nice prison. It's, you know, I don't mind being on the ocean. It's a beautiful place, and certainly the citizens out here tend to be more peaceful.
But when people call your tactics violent, how do you respond to that? I mean, you look at this footage, it looks violent, it's hostile.
The Japanese are committing violence against living whales. We are not hurting anybody, so we're not violent.
This battle is fought in the last place where humpback whales are considered endangered by the international agency that decides these things. These South Pacific humpbacks feed here in the Antarctic summer, then journey north 4,000 miles to mate. This is where much of the research is done, around a speck on the map called Rarotonga. This volcanic island, part of the Cook Islands, is just 21 miles around, with 10,000 residents and not a single traffic light. Here, we found the human who may know humpbacks best.
He's right behind the boat. Hello, beautiful. He's putting on quite a lovely show for us. And you just have to be careful and respect their space.
They take up a lot of space.
Nan Hauser is an American marine biologist who intended to come to Rarotonga for 1 month of research, but that was 16 years ago. Now her home and her lab are on the side of the volcano, and she spends her days eye to eye with her subjects.
As you watch them, as you see these massive animals and look at them in the eye, and they're looking at you, and they've never seen what a human looks like before, and so they're curious about you, and you're curious about them.
Humpbacks are acrobats. Their fins are like wings up to 20 feet long. They cooperate with each other to hunt for the krill and small fish that they eat by the tons. We've learned a lot about them in recent years. And some of what we know is because Nan Hauser risked her life to discover it. She's part of an international mission to harpoon humpbacks with small satellite transmitters. That rubber boat feels tiny next to an animal 50 feet long that weighs 79,000 pounds.
You got it? You sure?
It's in.
It's in.
Okay, watch out.
It's very, very dangerous. All they have to do is pick up their tail and give you a good whack, and all your bones are broken and your organs are ruptured. So it's very scary, very, very scary. My heart is pounding.
When they surface to breathe, the transmitter stuck in their blubber sends a signal. Now we know that humpbacks can travel 10,000 miles a year. That's the world record for a mammal. 80% of their lives are spent submerged, and this is where Nan Hauser has made some of her most beautiful discoveries.
Here we see a male standing on his head upside down singing a song. They are motionless, and the song bellows out.
The humpback song can be 20 minutes long, and they repeat the same song again and again. Males in one region will all sing the same song the same way, but next year they'll return with a new composition.
So this is air somehow moving around inside their heads that's making this sound.
Correct.
Even though they don't have vocal cords.
Correct. It's almost, I think, like taking a balloon full of air and going.
The sound carries for miles, and Hauser believes it's all to mark their territory.
They take turns singing, perhaps to say, my lungs are bigger, I can hold my breath longer, I can sing a more beautiful song, I'm the dominant male, I'm going to sing here, so you move away and sing somewhere else.
Can you do some of the sounds that you've heard?
I think the most common whale sound is kind of the but we get everything. We've even had the laughing monkey, creaky doors.
What are they saying?
We don't know.
So you speak whale, but you don't understand it?
Absolutely.
But she does understand a calf's jaw-clapping anger. Hauser captured it when a mother went off to mate and left this calf behind.
He does a small jaw clap right here.
What does that mean?
Oh, well, now I know it means I'm upset and I'm going to have a little bit of a temper tantrum. You can see him, hear it?
He's saying, pay attention to me.
Exactly.
Humpbacks give birth to one calf a year, so their comeback has been slow but steady. Before the whaling ban, there were maybe 5,000 left in the world, but now it's estimated there are 80,000. The biggest threats to them these days are collisions with ships and the kind of miles-long fishing line that wrapped up this whale.
They get wrapped up and then they get held underwater and they need to come up for air, otherwise they suffer and they drown.
Hauser hopes that the satellite tags will mark migration routes so that man can steer clear. History may show that we stopped the global slaughter just in the nick of time. Humpbacks are now found in every ocean, their numbers back to about 30% of what they had been before whaling. It's a sign that a fascinating and beautiful part of the planet is on the mend.
In December, nearly every member country of the United Nations pledged to protect at least 30% of the world's land and sea by 2030 to reverse the damage done by humans and protect vulnerable species. One of the animals at risk is also one of the largest in the ocean and among the least understood. Sperm whales are not the predators of Moby Dick legend. They have brains 6 times larger than ours and spend most of their lives in the darkest depths of the ocean. It is difficult to describe their size without comparing them to a school bus. Last month, we traveled with National Geographic explorer Enrique Sala to the Caribbean island of Dominica, where he's proposing protections for the hundreds of sperm whales living there. But first, we had to find them.
You guys ready? Go, go, go! Go, go! Go, guys, go! Look in the water, coming straight to you, yeah.
Most of Enrique Sala's dives don't start like a fire drill, even though he has spent thousands of hours underwater as an explorer.
Look down. At the back of you, look. This way, this way.
We came face to face with a pod of whales, but these are not the whales we traveled all this way to see. They are pygmy killer whales, known to threaten sperm whales. And because they are here, the sperm whales are not. These killer whales can grow up to 8.5 feet in size. Sala told us seeing them up close almost never happens.
You've never been able to get into the water with one of these. They're that elusive.
They are very elusive.
Why is that? Why do you not see them?
They are very smart. They hunt like wolves. They hunt in groups. And they don't care about interacting with humans. They are after the prey.
We were off the coast of Dominica, a country in the Eastern Caribbean. Residents call it Nature Island. Those rainforest-covered volcanic peaks drop thousands of feet down to the seafloor below, which is why hundreds of sperm whales live in these waters. They are one of the deepest diving mammals on the planet. They are mostly females here, families made up of grandmothers, mothers, and daughters who stay together for life, nursing and raising their young. When Enrique Sala was here in December, his National Geographic team filmed this. It is a pod of sleeping female sperm whales, vertical giants up to 40 feet long, suspended near the surface. Their nap lasts only about 15 minutes until the whales are ready to dive again in what can be an hour-long journey for squid thousands of feet down. Even to researchers, why they sleep like this is one of the great mysteries. What's it like to be in the water with them?
Magical. We have in our minds the legend of Moby Dick, these nasty, aggressive animals. But you jump in the water and they are so docile and gentle. They have never attacked humans. And they are so curious, especially the babies. So it's one of the most amazing wildlife encounters that one can have on the planet.
Your official title is Explorer in Residence. Not bad.
It's an oxymoron. Explorers are not supposed to be.
True, you're not supposed to be sitting in one place. What does that mean to be an explorer in the year 2023?
Very different from what an explorer of the 19th century was. I can dedicate my life and work with an amazing team of scientists, policy experts, filmmakers, storytellers, to work with local communities, governments, indigenous peoples, to assess the health of ocean places and help to protect them.
He grew up north of Barcelona, Spain, near the coast. His first dive was in a marine reserve.
It drove everything that I have done afterwards. If we give the ocean space, it can heal itself.
Sala moved to California, where he was a professor of marine ecology for 7 years at the Scripps Institution of Oceanography. You have had a long career in academia at a top university, and you tried that and decided, not for me, you walked away.
I walked away because my job was to study the impacts of humans in the ocean, the impacts of fishing and global warming. And one day I realized that all I was doing was writing the obituary of the ocean.
Writing the obituary of the ocean?
Yeah, I felt like the doctor who's telling you how you're going to die with excruciating detail, but not offering a cure.
Have you found that cure?
There is one solution that is proven. It's a success story everywhere in the world, which is marine reserves or marine protected areas, areas where damaging activities are banned and marine life can come back.
He founded the Pristine Seas Project in 2008. It combines sea exploration, scientific research, and public policy, and has worked with 17 countries to turn these large swaths of the ocean into marine protected areas. In Dominica, scientists estimate the sperm whale population declines by 3% each year. Sala says a preserve would protect them from their greatest threats. Not those pygmy killer whales we saw, or whaling, which has been banned for decades, but plastic trash, ocean noise pollution, and ship strikes.
If they continue with the status quo here, what happens?
If nothing is done, the population will probably continue declining. So reducing those threats, hopefully, will allow the sperm whale population to rebound. And the more whales there are, the more benefits Dominica and the local communities will obtain.
Hurricane Maria devastated those communities in 2017. Today, the island is continuing to rebuild and prepare for the future. Francine Barron heads the agency in charge of that effort.
What was it about Hurricane Maria that made the leaders of this country say, we have to do something, we really have to act?
We suffered the equivalent of 226% loss of GDP. So we could see the trend, and we realized that we needed to become much more resilient.
When Enrique Sala came to you with this idea of creating a sanctuary for these whales, what was his pitch to you?
We see whale watching as an important part of our tourism product, and it's something that needs to be protected. And the idea of creating greater protection for the whales is something that Dominica is very open to. And we were very pleased with the suggestion that Enrique made to creating a recognized sanctuary for the whales.
Enrique Sala compares it to a model that has worked in Rwanda, where protecting mountain gorillas helped bring tourism dollars to the local economy.
You gonna find us some whales?
Sure.
All right.
Captain Kurt Benoit was born and raised in Dominica and has been in the whale tourism business for more than 2 decades. We set out on his 38-foot Lady Rose from a small fishing village on the west coast. Our government permit to swim with the whales was good for 6 days. Captain Benoit uses a homemade device that picks up the distinct clicking of sperm whales as far as 11 miles away.
We got whales in the south.
Every 3 miles, we check to see if we were getting closer.
Come to Papa. Daddy's here.
Tell me about this really high-tech device you've got here.
You have underwater microphone which picks up sound from 360. So what I did, I take a salad bowl with neoprene. So the hydrophone is kind of hidden. So as it goes out, it actually brings you straight to wherever you hear the sound.
So this is a salad bowl from your house?
Yes.
What do the whales sound like?
It's like a horse is galloping on a hard surface. So if you hear several of them, that means there's a lot of whales there. Let's keep on going, man. I'm gonna find these guys.
All right.
On the second day, a water spout.
See it? It's right here. Look, guys. See him? You can see its top. Look at him. Oh my gosh.
Go! Swimmers in the water!
Males here live with their families until their teen years. Then they roam mostly alone, swimming thousands of miles away. Caribbean male sperm whales have been found as far away as Norway, returning here only to mate.
Our cameraman got lucky enough or unlucky enough to have the whale poop on him.
So the whales go down, they hunt squid, they come back to the surface, they breathe, they rest, and they poop. And that poop is full of nutrients, which fertilizes the shallow waters.
So a good thing, I guess.
It's a good thing.
Come on, people, we're looking for spouts.
But our luck didn't last.
Okay, guys, nothing is yet.
We spent the next day searching for sperm whales, and the next.
Nothing at all?
Nothing at all.
And the next. Not a single click.
Okay, guys, it's pretty quiet.
And then, in the last hour of the last day of our trip.
Yeah, lots of animals in the area, guys. Woo! They're coming back. But I'm getting songs 360. So that means the whales, we're above them. We're right there.
Yes, he blows! Yes, he blows! Yes, he blows! Yes, he blows! Yes, he blows!
Go! Go! And stay there, it's coming to you!
Cecilia.
It's coming to you! Coming to you!
We jumped in the water and a young female swam right to us. She came within feet. At first, her size was terrifying. She made a sound like a creaking door hinge. It's one of the ways whales communicate and socialize. With eyes on the side of her head, she stared right at us. She had squid in her mouth, leftover from lunch thousands of feet below. She stayed and rolled around, and her jaw was wide open. She was using echolocation, bouncing those clicks off of us, trying to figure out what we were.
You could hear the clicking. You could hear her. Once you were really close to her, you could hear that so
Very
loudly.
loud. I could feel it in my bones.
Mm-hmm. You grabbed my hand. You could tell I was nervous.
I was excited too.
You were?
They are huge. You have to respect them.
You have to respect them. There is a sense of awe that comes with being in there. She was looking right at us.
And she left us a souvenir.
Piece of squid.
Sperm whales live in...
Shane Giro is another National Geographic explorer. He started the Dominica Sperm Whale Project, and over the past 18 years, he's identified more than 35 families.
Did you recognize the whale that we saw?
The animal you met belongs to the EC2 clan, the other clan of whales that we've known exists in the Caribbean, but we haven't seen all that much. And those groups identify themselves by making specific patterns of clicks called codas. It's a part of who they are, where their grandmother grew up, and so it really ties the animals and the place together.
What does the coda of the EC2 sound like?
They make the 5R3 coda, and it sounds like this. 5 slow clicks. And she came up to you and made this 5R3 coda, saying, "I am from the EC2 clan, are you?"
She was rolling around and she kept coming back. But is that me assigning human characteristics to a whale, or is she actually a playful animal?
These are the animals that are holding the largest brain to ever exist, maybe in the universe. And they use that for complicated thinking and behavior. Absolutely, this was an animal that was playful. And that curiosity of the animal actively coming towards you just shows that this is an animal that's investigating something in its world.
And most people don't know.
Back on the dock,
There is a treasure here.
Enrique Sala says it's that world he's trying to protect.
Being in the water with sperm whales is a magical experience. There's something spiritual there. This is more than science and data. Sense of awe and wonder that is unavoidable when you are in the water with these gentle giants.
In what year will the human population grow too large for the Earth to sustain? And the answer is about 1970, according to research by the World Wildlife Fund. In 1970, the planet's 3.5 billion people were sustainable. But on this New Year's Day, the population is 8 billion. Today, wild plants and animals are running out of places to live. The scientists you're about to meet say the Earth is suffering a crisis of mass extinction on a scale unseen since the dinosaurs. We're going to show you a possible solution, but first, have a look at how humanity is already suffering from the vanishing wild. In Washington State, the Salish Sea helped feed the world.
With this weather and the way things feel once I get out here, it's time to be fishing. That's what it feels like.
Commercial fisherman Dana Wilson supported a family on the Salish Sea's legendary wealth of salmon. He remembers propellers churning the water off Blaine, Washington, and cranes straining for the state's $200 million annual catch.
That used to be a buying station. They're gone now. They don't buy anymore. So that building over there used to buy salmon. They don't buy salmon anymore. It's just not here.
In 1991, one salmon species was endangered. Today, 14 salmon populations are foundering. They've been crowded out of rivers by habitat destruction, warming, and pollution. Dana Wilson used to fish all summer. Today, a conservation authority grants rare, fleeting permission to throw a net.
There was a season.
There was a season.
Now there's a day.
There's a day, and sometimes it's hours. Sometimes you might get 12 hours, 16 hours. That's what we're down to.
Here, the vanishing wild scuttled a way of life that began with native tribes 1,000 years ago.
I don't remember anybody doing anything other than salmon fishing.
Fisherman Armando Briones is a member of the Lummi tribe, which calls itself People of the Salmon. He didn't imagine the rich harvest would end with his 5 fishing boats.
All of a sudden you're trying to figure out, well, how am I gonna make that paycheck for my family? Well, for me it was like, well, I have a backup for a backup for a backup for a backup.
Briones' backups include his new food truck, switching to crab fishing, and consulting on cannabis farms. His scramble to adapt is being repeated around the world. A World Wildlife Fund study says that in the past 50 years, the abundance of global wildlife has collapsed 69%, mostly for the same reason.
Too many people, too much consumption, and growth mania.
At the age of 90, biologist Paul Ehrlich may have lived long enough to see some of his dire prophecies come true.
You seem to be saying that humanity is not sustainable.
No, humanity is not sustainable. To maintain our lifestyle, yours and mine, basically, for the entire planet, you'd need 5 more Earths. Not clear where they're going to come from.
Just in terms of the resources that would be required.
Resources that would be required, the systems that support our lives, which of course are the biodiversity that we're wiping out. Humanity is very busily sitting on a limb that we're sawing off.
In 1968, Ehrlich, a biology professor at Stanford, became a doomsday celebrity with a bestseller forecasting the collapse of nature.
When the population bomb came out, you were described as an alarmist.
I was alarmed. I am still alarmed. All of my colleagues are alarmed.
The alarm Ehrlich sounded in '68 warned that overpopulation would trigger widespread famine. He was wrong about that. The Green Revolution fed the world. But he also wrote in '68 that heat from greenhouse gases would melt polar ice, and humanity would overwhelm the wild. Today, humans have taken over 70% of the planet's land and 70% of the fresh water.
The rate of extinction is extraordinarily high now and getting higher all the time.
We know the rate of extinction is extraordinarily high because of a study of the fossil record by biologist Tony Barnofsky, Ehrlich's Stanford colleague.
The data are rock solid. I don't think you'll find a scientist that will say we're not in an extinction crisis.
Barnofsky's research suggests today's rate of extinction is up to 100 times faster than is typical in the nearly 4 billion year history of life. These peaks represent the few times that life collapsed globally, and the last was the dinosaurs, 66 million years ago.
There are 5 times in Earth's history where we had mass extinctions, and by mass extinctions I mean at least 75%, 3/4 of the known species disappearing from the face of the Earth. Now we're witnessing what a lot of people are calling the 6th mass extinction, where the same thing could happen on our watch.
It's a horrific state of the planet when common species, the ubiquitous species that we're familiar with, are declining.
Tony Barnofsky's colleague in the study of extinction is his wife, biologist Liz Hadley, faculty director at Stanford's Jasper Ridge Research Preserve in California.
You know, I see it in my mind, and it's a really sad state. If you spend any time in California, you know the loss of water. The loss of water means that there are dead salmon you see in the river right before your eyes. But it also means the demise of those birds that rely on the salmon fishery, eagles. It means, you know, things like minks and otters that rely on fish. It means that our habitats that we're used to, the forests that, 3,000-year-old forests, are going to be gone. So it means silence, and it means some very catastrophic events because it's happening so quickly.
It means you look out your window and 3/4 of what you think ought to be there is no longer there. That's what mass extinction looks like.
What we see just in California is, the loss of our iconic state symbols. We have no more grizzly bears in California.
The only grizzly bears in California are on the state flag?
That's our state mammal, and they're not here anymore.
Is it too much to say that we're killing the planet?
No.
I would say it's too much to say that we're killing the planet, because the planet's going to be fine. What we're doing is we're killing our way of life.
The worst of the killing is in Latin America, where the World Wildlife Fund study says the abundance of wildlife has fallen 94% since 1970. But it was also in Latin America that we found the possibility of hope. Mexican ecologist Gerardo Ceballos is one of the world's leading scientists on extinction. He told us the only solution is to save the 1/3 of the Earth that remains wild. To prove it, he's running a 3,000 square mile experiment. In the Calakmul Biosphere Reserve near Guatemala, he is paying family farmers to stop cutting the forest.
We're going to pay each family a certain amount of money that is more than you will get cutting down the forest if you protect it.
And how much are you paying out every year?
For instance, each family here will get around $1,000.
More than enough here to make up for lost farmland. In total, the payouts come to $1.5 million a year, or about $2,000 per square mile. The tab is paid through the charity of wealthy donors.
The investment to protect what is left is, really small.
The payoff on that investment is being collected on Ceballos' jungle cameras. 30 years ago, the jaguar was very nearly extinct in Mexico. Now Ceballos says they've rebounded to about 600 in the reserve. There are other places where there are reserves around the world where they've been able to increase the populations of certain species. But I wonder, are all these little success stories enough to prevent mass extinction?
All the big success that we have in protecting forests and recovering animals like tigers in India, jaguars in Mexico, elephants in Botswana, and so on, are incredible, amazing successes. But there are like grains of sand in a beach. And to really make a big impact, we need to scale up this 10,000 times. So they are important because they give us hope, but they are completely insufficient to cope with climate change.
So what would the world have to do?
What we would have to do is to really understand that the climate change and species extinction is a threat to humanity, and then put all the machinery of society, political, economic, and social, towards finding solutions to the problems.
Finding solutions to the problems was the goal 2 weeks ago at the UN Biodiversity Conference, where nations agreed to conservation targets. But at the same meeting in 2010, those nations agreed to limit the destruction of the Earth by 2020, and not one of those goals was met. This despite thousands of studies, including the continuing research of Stanford biologist Paul Ehrlich. You know that there is no political will to do any of the things that you're recommending.
I know there's no political will to do any of the things that I'm concerned with, which is exactly why I and the vast majority of my colleagues think we've had it, that the next few decades will be the end of the kind of civilization we're used to.
In the 50 years since Ehrlich's population bomb, humanity's feasting on resources has tripled. We're already consuming 175% of what the Earth can regenerate. And consider, half of humanity, about 4 billion, live on less than $10 a day. They aspire to cars, air conditioning, and a rich diet. but they won't be fed by the fishermen of Washington's Salish Sea, including Armando Briones.
The tribe has been fishing salmon here for hundreds of years.
Yeah.
And your generation is seeing the end of that.
It's getting harder and harder. I hate to say it, I don't want to say it's the end of it.
Why do you feel so emotionally attached to this?
It's everything we know. I'm fortunate enough to know where I know a lot of different things. I've done a lot of different things in my life. I've gotten good at evolving and changing. But not everybody here is built like that. And to some of us, this is what they know. This is all they know.
The 5 mass extinctions of the ancient past were caused by natural calamities, volcanoes, and an asteroid. Today, if the science is right, humanity may have to survive a 6th mass extinction in a world of its own making.
The United States has national parks devoted to canyons and deserts, glaciers and geysers, even underwater coral reefs, 63 national parks in all. But somehow, we skipped the American prairie. The grasslands that once stretched from the Mississippi River to the Rockies played a vital role in the lives of Native Americans, white settlers, and an endless variety of wildlife. They inspired explorers and artists, but apparently not park planners. Nearly 20 years ago, a nonprofit organization began trying to fix that, not with a new national park, but rather a huge privately operated nature reserve on the Great Plains, one that would be open to the public, but also a place where buffalo can roam once again. Through a vast stretch of open, and for the moment empty, grassland, Allison Fox is taking us up a muddy 2-track path in search of buffalo. This road is incredible. Fox is the CEO of American Prairie, which has, as just one of many audacious goals, the restoration of bison to a landscape they once ruled. Oh, there.
Oh, there they are.
There, look at that. Wow, there they are.
Look at the babies.
Look at that. We found part of what American Prairie calls its conservation herd of about 800 buffalo. This group is mainly mothers with new calves, which are a distinctive shade of red.
Trying to do a count of the babies, but now they've kind of moved the babies into the middle of the group.
This land is like this as far as the eye can see.
As far as the eye can see.
That's not a bad description of the scale of American Prairie's ambition to create the largest nature reserve in the contiguous United States. The nonprofit has more than 50 employees, from fundraisers to buffalo wranglers. Allison Fox has worked there for 15 years and has been in charge for the last 4. Overall, the goal is to have how many acres in this reserve?
Yeah, the overall goal is about 5,000 square miles, 3.2 million acres of intact grasslands. Comparable to the size of the state of Connecticut, and also comparable to Glacier and Yellowstone National Parks combined.
That's big.
It is big.
The big chunk of land is mostly north of the Missouri River in north-central Montana, one of the most remote parts of the country. It's a patchwork of privately owned cattle ranches and land owned by the government, including a huge existing national wildlife refuge named after the famous cowboy painter Charles M. Russell.
And that 1.1 million acres serves as the anchor of American Prairie's 3.2 million acre vision.
And so you've got these big chunks of federal land and you're buying land in between to try to piece it all together.
Exactly.
So just about every time a private ranch comes up for sale inside its desired footprint, American Prairie tries to buy it to add another piece to its puzzle and preserve more grassland. How many ranches have you purchased?
We have purchased 34 ranches.
To buy all those ranches, American Prairie has raised nearly $200 million from more than 4,000 donors, including Wall Street financiers and technology moguls. It says it will take hundreds of millions more and decades more to complete the patchwork. So this is a long game.
This is a long game, and it's a long game for land acquisition. It's a probably even longer game for the restoration of habitats and species. This area was America's Serengeti, truly America's Serengeti, with tens of thousands of bison, pronghorn, elk, deer, grizzly bears, wolves.
Is that the goal, or is that a goal to restore that?
Yes, to have the ecosystem function fully as it once did.
Charles Russell's paintings portray a romanticized version of what the prairie ecosystem used to look like. Teeming herds of buffalo, Native Americans hunting and living alongside the buffalo, at least until they both were displaced by white settlers and hundreds of thousands of cattle.
It's amazing to think of the people that lived here before us, people and other things. So over this direction, there's quite a cluster of teepee rings, so the Native Americans used to use this. Come on, Ross.
Connie French operates this cattle ranch with her husband Craig, and they are proud of their collaboration with conservation groups. In fact, they graze some of their cattle on a ranch that's been owned by the Nature Conservancy for more than 20 years.
Okay, girl.
But when American Prairie's early leaders came in talking about saving the land, it really rubbed her wrong.
So saving it, yes, but not just tromping over people.
Is that what it feels like?
It does feel like that sometimes, yes. So
They came in like, we know better. You have said that for their vision to become a reality, you and what you do, that you're gone.
I guess I can say yes, that's how it feels to us, to me.
Along the few roads slicing through the grasslands here, the signs are everywhere. Save the cowboy, stop American Prairie Reserve. They make it clear that a lot of Connie French's ranching neighbors share her concern. What some ranchers have told us is that when you say you want to save the land, what they hear is that you want to save the land from them.
Yeah, no, we are well aware that that word save hit a nerve, and that was not at all our intention. Many of our ranching neighbors are committed to conservation, so if I could pull back that word save, I absolutely would.
American Prairie is now working hard to mend fences with skeptical neighbors. It has a program called Wild Sky, run by a wildlife biologist on its staff, Daniel Kinka.
Wild Sky ranchers are the best at what they do in terms of sustainable ranching.
Wild Sky will pay a rancher up to $15,000 a year for things like modifying fences to make them easier for wildlife to get over or through while still keeping cattle contained. It also pays ranchers to install cameras on their property. The rancher gets paid for every animal that crosses the path of this camera?
That's correct. You get a coyote, that's $25. A black bear comes behind it, that's $300. 4 or 5 elk come behind it, that's $50. The biggest payouts are for wolves and grizzly bears, $500 per picture per camera per day.
Wolves and grizzly bears aren't on this part of the prairie at the moment. The idea of Wild Sky is that as they and other wildlife do return, payments will help cattle ranchers tolerate them.
Make sure you follow up the calves.
Lance Johnson, a fourth-generation Montanan who runs a cattle ranch with his wife and 2 daughters, is one of 15 Wild Sky ranchers. The cameras on his property have captured enough pictures this year to earn him $6,000, the annual maximum American Prairie will pay for photos of wildlife.
These ranches are so hard to make profitable that if you can figure out any way to supplement your income, then that's probably necessary right now.
Johnson also leases grass and grazes cattle on a ranch owned by American Prairie. So while some of his neighbors see it as a threat, He says that working with it helps ensure his family's future.
You see a place for you and your daughters and your cattle on this land for the foreseeable future.
We hope so. We hope for the rest of our lives that we're there. I want to do everything I can to give our girls that opportunity to have ranching in the future.
American Prairie says it intends to work alongside cattle ranchers for decades to come, and it does have some natural allies in the neighborhood.
The rancher and the wild space, can those two coexist?
Yeah, they can and they are. Happening right now.
Mark Azure was born and raised on the Fort Belknap Reservation, which is adjacent to where American Prairie is assembling its reserve. He's a former president of the reservation's tribal council, made up of members of two tribes, the Nakota and the Ani.
Is there any recollection of what this land was like before the white settlers came? Like the wildlife?
Yes, it was plentiful. Millions and millions of buffalo and antelope and deer and prairie dogs, black-footed ferrets, elk.
The tribes at Fort Belknap began building their bison herd nearly a half-century ago, and it's now more than 1,000 animals. Mark Azure took us out to see part of the herd, which roams across a huge pasture on the reservation.
So they're just scattered out doing what buffalo do, and that's eat the grass and right now enjoy the weather.
The tribes benefit economically from selling some buffalo meat. But you can see in the symbols used during native ceremonies that their value is much greater than money.
We know the history of the tribes and the buffalo, and they were one and the same. To come out here and get on the prairie and see a herd of buffalo, you can kind of leave that world for a little bit and reconnect with that lifestyle that my ancestors lived years ago. Might be just a little bit, but it's there.
Some ranchers fear that the tribes and American Prairie will let their buffalo roam free as they once did.
You use the term free, and I always argued that point because there's a fence somewhere. There has to be a fence somewhere. But as much room as we can give them to roam, then within that context, they'll be free. But not like it was 200 years ago. And we understand that.
Still be a place where you can come and see the buffalo roam.
Absolutely.
American Prairie encourages people to visit the land it owns. It operates campgrounds and has built huts and yurts that anyone can reserve. It allows hunting on many properties, which helps to build support among Montanans.
Across the West, you see more and more no trespassing signs. We've talked a lot about wildlife and wildlife habitat, but certainly providing access for people to appreciate, learn from, recreate on this land is a really important part of what we're doing as well.
The debate over American Prairie is often framed as an either-or. Either there are cattle or buffalo. If preservationists win, ranchers lose. What we found across these wide expanses of grass were much more subtle shades of green.
You know, when a new group comes in, new folks, new neighbors, it takes some time to learn if it's legit.
What I think I hear you saying is they have to earn your trust. And so far they have not.
No. That trust isn't given lightly.
With the size of the state of Montana and the herds of cattle, hundreds of thousands of animals in this state, I don't think buffalo will ever compete. And that's not what we're trying to do. We're trying, with American Prairie, take a section of land in the state and return it back as best we can to what it was 200 years ago.
It's a huge section of land.
Still not bigger than Montana. I think there's room here for both.